Hey everyone, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you for helping me reach 100 subscribers. I honestly couldn't have done this without your love, support, and constant encouragement. Every like, comment, and subscribe means a lot to me. Now let's keep this journey going. Our next target is 200 subscribers, and I know we can do it together. If you enjoy my content, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let's grow as a family. Thank you once again. Zoro is dead, and the Straw Hats are shattered. When Robin uncovers an ancient legend promising resurrection on a forgotten myth island, hope returns, but at a terrible cost. The spell demands proof of love, something no one believes Zoro ever felt. With only 48 hours before the legend becomes useless, Luffy forces his crew back to sea, racing against time, doubt, and destiny itself. As the truth behind Zoro's heart slowly surfaces, the crew must face one question. Can devotion strong enough to defy death truly exist? Disclaimer. This story do not belong to me. The author is The Stuff of Legends by 1004-Angel. Respect to author.
Chapter 12 Ordeal of Love, Take 2. Live. I thought wishing for it was forbidden. Nobody would allow me that. If I'm allowed to declare my wish, then I want to live. Nico Robin. Robin Pav. Venus's smile unnerved me. It was the smile of a sly fox with its eyes on the chicken coop. I was beginning to reconsider my standpoint, but I couldn't back down now. It was too late to take it all back. Even through my doubt, I was confident in my abilities. Whatever the love goddess threw at me, I would be ready for it. Never in my life had I ever been more wrong. Venus led me into a different room away from the Valkyrie and my nakama, isolating me from any possible means of assistance. Nami was left fuming with a lovesick cook in the throne room. But Lady Freya didn't seem keen on keeping the humans in her presence any longer than necessary. I didn't want to drag out this process. The door the goddess and I had just passed through slammed shut, enclosing me in a dank chamber, water dripping from the stone crevices in the walls. It stank of mildew and mold and what I thought must be rotting fish. A strange place to hold the test. Venus seemed to think so as well, because with a wave of her hand, the room turned into a lavish VIP room, complete with cups of coffee on a small table situated between two futons. Venus faced me, her face changing to that of a woman with long black hair and blue eyes, golden snakes dangling from her ears. Robin, she said. That's a beautiful name. Thank you, I said, keeping my face as lackadaisical as possible. Come on, lighten up, the love goddess chirped. All I'm going to do is ask you a few questions. Questions, I repeated. Make yourself comfortable. She gestured behind me to one of the futons, cushions of red velvet. I settled into the seat, helping myself to a cup of coffee. I was about to take a sip when an air of caution swept over me, and I returned the cup to its coaster. Venus remained standing, playing with her earrings, and I suddenly recognized her face. Boa Hancock, the warlord, claimed most beautiful woman in the world. I could see why Venus might adopt those features. She really was a sight. Might we begin? I asked. What is the airspeed velocity of an unladen alabastan swallow? I blinked. What? I asked you the airspeed velocity of an unladen alabastan swallow, Venus repeated simply. I grit my teeth. This was no test of ambition or bravery as I had been expecting. This was a test of basic knowledge. I knew the answer, of course, but it still baffled me. I spoke the answer and attempted to ask what was going on, but Venus wasn't giving me any time to question her. List in order the names of the current vice admirals in which they were promoted. Venus continued with questions such as these for maybe 15 minutes. Sometimes she asked about the world government, sometimes geography, some history, etc. Nothing that was truly worth my effort. Time was wasting and I had neither the time nor energy for silly quizzes like this. I hadn't been able to check Zoro's time before he had been stolen by the woman standing a few feet away, so I didn't know how much time I had left before he would be gone forever. What is the— Stop, I interrupted, standing abruptly from the couch. I won't answer another question. I demand you give me the real test. What are you talking about? Venus asked innocently. This is the test. No, all this is doing is testing my patience, I growled, not even attempting to shelter my frustration and anger under a veil of forced calm. You are wasting my time on useless information. Zoro is counting on me to rescue him, and believe you me, nothing is going to stop me. Venus finally sat on the other futon, crossing her legs at the knee and propping her chin in the cup of her hand daintily. He's counting on you. I suddenly found interest in my sandaled feet. He's saved me countless times before, sometimes without his knowing. The first time, we had just met. He didn't fall for my usual methods of bribery, teaching me that not everyone is vulnerable. And then again, in a place not unlike Valhalla. I hugged my arms, my vulnerability suddenly exposed to the love goddess. I can still feel his strong arm around my shoulders as he caught me, just before I fell. He didn't have to do that. I had only just joined the crew, he had no obligations at all, so why was I so quickly a part of this family? My eyelids slid closed. I thought I was wrong to think I had already assimilated into the Straw Hats. When Foxy chose me to be a part of his crew, I heard him say he knew I would betray them eventually. It hurt. It wasn't my fault I had been chosen. Granted, I had planned on leaving them someday, anyway, but not like that. So I was surprised when I was welcomed back into the crew after Foxy's defeat, albeit my apparent eagerness to change my alliances again. I had convinced myself by that time that Zoro would never really accept me into the group. And at first, I was okay with that. But as our journey wore on, I found myself longing for his company. I started pulling all-nighters so I could read while he trained, and I engaged him in light conversation whenever the urge struck me, which was often. Everything I had built while traveling with the Straw Hats crashed down when Aokiji appeared. My fingers tightened around myself. I knew immediately we were all in danger. The appearance of any admiral means trouble, but to me, Aokiji was the worst of them all. I didn't dare let down my guard. And I was right, he attacked us. Well, me first, and I was sure I was going to die. A light smile breathed through my lips. But Zoro, he saved me. Again, I could read his body language like the runes on a poneglyph. He was angry, a tiger ready to pounce. Why? Did this mean he finally trust me? Sees me as one of the crew? I didn't know, but he had stopped Aokiji. No one had protected me like that before, and here he was, doing it for the second time in a row. A tear slipped from my eye and carved a shining path down my cheek. That, I think, is when I realized. That you loved him, Venus finished the sentence for me. I dipped my head. Yes, but I didn't tell him. Why should I? They were my feelings. He would reject them, anyway. Zoro wasn't that kind of person to fall into a romantic relationship with anyone, much less me. What else? Venus pressed. Eni's lobby happened, I whispered. I should have known after the appearance of Admiral Aokiji, but I had let down my guard. I had no choice but to betray them. It was for their sake. And for his. Seeing him, Luffy, Chopper and Nami burst into Iceberg's room to take me back, it took all my willpower to appear uncaring. In all honesty, I wanted to go with them, but they didn't know the danger I posed to their safety. Why couldn't they just leave me be? I surrendered to CP9 so that the Straw Hats be allowed full pardon. I didn't need saving. I only wanted to die, that was my destiny. I was the devil's child, shunned all my life only for being a survivor of the infamous island. It was a painful 20 years, hunted by the government, finding no place to live for fear of betrayal, scavenging for food. The government had caught up to me one day, like I knew they would, but not like this. I was going to die soon, and I accepted that fact. My only consolation was that Zoro and the others would survive. I wanted nothing more than to die. To forget and dissolve all weaknesses like love, friendship, and family into darkness. They called me the demon child, and for good reason. I was the lowest of the low, the hated. Death was my constant companion, and I had resolved myself that I would soon become its. But the Straw Hats, I laughed lightly. Those pirates forced me to live. They forced me to see the world and myself in a different light and embrace it. I never thought I could be so happy in my life to reunited with the people I could call nakama. Friends. Those who would protect me. They would stay with me, though the hardships. They would protect me with their very lives. They didn't care about my past, about who I was, or what the world government. To them, I was Nico Robin, their friend and crew member, and didn't care about anything else. My only regret was that I could not continue to travel as a Straw Hat and share in their memories. Saul's voice rang in my ears, his words confusing to an 8-year-old child, but a lifelong motto for a grown woman. There's no such thing as being born into this world to be alone. I found out that the key to release me from my sea stone shackles, the number 5 key, had been retrieved by Zoro. Was it fate? No, I don't believe in those types of things. But an omen? Maybe. After the events of Eni's lobby, I was 100% convinced Zoro counted me as one of his nakama. All previous doubt of my loyalty had been extinguished from his mind.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
We exchanged small talk later, and I felt the words he spoke came from the heart. I had never planned to marry anyone, much less have children. Even when I realized my affections, I had no intention on furthering that dream, nor the relationship. At least, not until I was positive he felt the same way. But I couldn't help but think what a good fatherly figure Zoro was. I laughed again just thinking about it. I haven't told anyone this, but I had seen him with the children before we met in the shopping center. I planted an eye and ear and sat back. Despite the kid's hectic ways, he seemed to know what to do and how to go about doing it. Just like a real father's instincts. And when I confronted him, the red on his face was priceless. And I meant it when I said it suited him. I really did. When we left Water 7, I thanked the crew again for saving me. The Straw Hats took it in stride, but Zoro only shrugged it off. Do you really think anyone on this crew would accept a nakama dying for them? Those were his exact words. So why? My voice rose unintentionally. Did he even believe himself when he said that? That hypocrite. What did he do? Venus asked like a curious psychiatrist. Though I could tell by the expression on her face that she already had a pretty good idea. He died, that's what, I answered darkly. Bartholomew Kuma is known for not delivering mercy to anyone. The fact that he agreed to take his life instead of Luffy's was probably because he had an ulterior motive, but he did not do it because he had compassion or respect for what Zoro wanted to do. I quickly wiped away a tear I had just felt escape a duct. Luffy would die for any of us, but he knows his limits. On the other hand, Zoro is too reckless. He couldn't even imagine our reactions to finding him dead. He couldn't even come close. He probably didn't stop to think about how he would feel. How I would feel. That's why I need to find the River Chai and bring him back. All these efforts would prove to be worthless if I'm trapped here answering petty trivia. He saved me, and now it's my turn to return the favor. I was aware I had just blabbed my entire relationship with the deceased swordsman to Venus, but at the moment I was indifferent to that fact. It remained that I've given her my reasons, and whatever the love goddess made of it was up to her. But I was standing firm by my words, and nothing could alter my course. Venus observed me for a few minutes, her expression unreadable. Cool and calculating eyes stared deep into mine as if assessing the honesty of my monologue. Slowly, she suddenly broke eye contact and raised her hands. I tensed, ready to fight. Clap, clap, clap. I watched, dumbfounded, as the goddess applauded me. Her perfect lips pulled back into an elegant smile. She was applauding me. What for? Bravo, bravo. She laughed. I'm afraid I don't understand, I said, still cautious. You passed my test, Venus chortled. It was never about the trivia. It was how long you could stand the pressure hanging over your shoulders. You got up to 12 questions, 15 is the failing point. She moved closer to me, putting her hands on my shoulders and forcing me to join her back on the futon. And that eulogy was heartwarming. Seriously, I'm sobbing. It was testing my commitment, not physical abilities, I summarized. Yep, Venus chirped. But there's a few more questions for extra credit. Or you can leave now and rescue your swordsman. I was never one to back down from a challenge, no matter the stakes. Answer me these questions 3, ere the other side ye see, Venus said mysteriously. Her face morphed again, and I held back a light gasp. The short black hair, long nose and bright cerulean eyes belonged to me. She had assumed my features, and was pulling them off marvelously. Question 1, Venus began. What is your name? Nico Robin, I said, raising a skeptical eyebrow. Question 2, what do you seek? I seek Zoro's soul and body returned to me. Look me in the eyes, the love goddess instructed, and the two pairs of identical eyes met in harmony. Question 3, can you admit to yourself that you love him? I blinked. Since my revelation, I hadn't spoken those 3 important words aloud. I didn't know if it would confirm anything for the goddess of love, but actually admitting it aloud to myself would lift a tremendous weight from my shoulders. It was then I realized why Venus had adopted my face. To tell myself I loved Zoro would finalize my affections. I had always been afraid to speak it aloud, lest I be heard. And therein lies the problem. If I feared others, even my own nakama, discovering these feelings nesting inside my heart, then I couldn't say I was in love at all. I didn't blink. I love him with all my heart, I said slowly and calmly, not diverting my gaze from hers. One may tolerate a world of demons for the sake of an angel. Venus analyzed my answer. I didn't know if she believed me, but her choice would decide my and Zoro's face. Out of context, I wondered if that was really what I looked like when I was thinking hard. Do my eyebrows really scrunch up like that? Find Hermes, Venus said suddenly, bringing my full attention back to her. He is the messenger of the gods, and guide to travelers. Tell him that I sent you. Wait, I said, I don't quite understand. Silly, I'm giving you directions to the River Chai. The goddess smiled a bright, childish smile, a strange sight with my face. But I'm not going to let Nami and Sanji ruin this. So you're going alone. Then what was the extra credit for? Her fist plopped into an open palm. Right, you get an extra 30 minutes. The inside of my arm began to sting. Looking down, I saw numbers etched in purple glowing in plain view. 2 hours 46 minutes and 12 seconds. It was the same timer device Zoro had. This was Venus's way of telling me to hurry up or panic. Either way, I had just under 3 hours left and no time to waste. I'll entertain your friends while you're gone, she encouraged. Remember, Hermes, Aphrodite sent you. I didn't have time to speak before the room suddenly went black. Chapter 13 Run, Robin, run. They call me the demon child. Nico Robin. Robin Pa. Aphrodite sent you. That's correct, I huffed. She wants you to lead me to the River Chai. The tall man twirled his caduceus in his fingers thoughtfully. Does she now? Hermes was not the kind of god I expected him to be. In fact, quite the opposite. Instead of an ancient Greek toga and sandals, the messenger god was dressed in a light jogger's uniform, a large tote slung over his shoulder. Salt and pepper hair stuck up haphazardly in all directions like he'd woken up late for a jog through a hurricane. I had found him quite haphazardly, after asking directions from a creature similar to Chopper, only with a hairy upper body of a man. Hermes had been lounging on marble steps leading into a tall castle-like structure, talking animatedly into a dendenmuchi. The man on the other end was demanding a discount on scrap metal. The forges isn't the best place to make drachma. I don't make the prices, the god had been yelling. Take it up with the dwarves or the telekines. Without wasting time, I approached Mercury's Greek equivalent before he could disappear. The satyr, as I learned the half-goat creature was called, had warned me Hermes was always on the go, and he's never in the same place for 10 minutes. I had the misfortune of just missing him before he vanished with a flap of his winged sandals. Only by sheer luck did I see him reappear in front of me on the steps several minutes later. I had been running non-stop since I found myself smack dab in the middle of a carriage race of some sort. Can you pay? Hermes asked, ignoring the ringing den in his hand. I pat my non-existent pockets. No. Then I can't help you. But, I began, but Hermes held up a finger, silencing my protests. Hello. He spoke into the transponder snail. Has my new sword arrived yet? A gruff masculine voice spoke. Hephaestus is talkin', his own sweet time, and, so are you. Calm down, Ares, Hermes interjected. I'll give you an overnight shipping package. Now, when it's done, no extra charge, Hermes finished as if the man on the other line hadn't spoken. Take it or leave it. The snail closed its eyes with a clank to indicate the messenger god had hung up on his client. He turned his attention back to me, who had just finished checking the timer on my arm for the third time. And what are you still doing here? I told you, I need to find the river Chai. Aphrodite sent me, it's a matter of life and death. Hermes put his face close to mine. You're not an automation. No, I said, relating in my mind an automation to a cyborg. Satyr. No. Muse. No. Then what are you? Human. Hermes pulled away, rolling up his sleeve to check his watch. I subconsciously cast my eyes down to my own watch again, the numbers ticking by steadily. 2 hours 10 minutes and 19 seconds. I have a few spare minutes, Hermes reasoned aloud to himself. Athena can wait on that delivery, but I've already got Pegasus working double time on Zeus's shipments. He looked at me again. Not enough to get you all the way, mind. A smile pulled at my lips. That's good enough. The wings on his sandals began to beat gracefully, lifting the messenger god into the air. He wrapped a hand around my wrist. Hold on, he smirked. Going down, down, but the legend says highest temple. Doesn't say where the highest temple has to be, does it? My stomach crawled up in my throat as I was suddenly yanked downward, plummeting straight through the ground. Colors rushed around my eyes in a tangled mess, wind whistling in my ears as Hermes' sandals flapped at the speed of light. I wanted to cry out, but kept my lips tightly secure. I didn't want to give Hermes any satisfaction. I did allow myself a grunt as I suddenly slammed into something hard and cold, all the breath knocked from my lungs. Hermes stood a few feet away, once again on his den with an irate Ares. I pulled myself from the rocky earth I had landed on. A dank, musty smell invaded my nostrils, a cold air settling on my already chilled skin and sending goosebumps up my arms. High above my head, the ceiling was riddled with sharp stalactites. A black river raged in a deep trench by my foot, the liquid frothed over the bank and sizzled as it splattered against the stones. I stepped from it hastily to avoid being burned. Was this the river Chai? It didn't exactly meet my expectations. Chai could loosely be interpreted to life, and the river didn't seem to represent that at all. My eyes analyzed my surroundings. Venus, or Aphrodite, had said that Zoro would be waiting by the river. I didn't see anything remotely humanoid that could be identified as a body, much less that of the swordsman. Hermes-san, I said, looking around for the god who had been standing a few feet away just a moment before. He had apparently wandered off, and now the only thing I could see was a slip of paper where he had been standing. I scooped it up, somehow deciphering the messy handwriting. God called out, I read aloud. Follow the souls to Erebus, then to Asphodel. Find the field of Elysium, and then Isles of the Blessed and talk to Adonis. He'll help you. I raised an eyebrow. Who was Adonis? The name rang a bell, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Hoping for a hint, I continued reading. I suggest you hurry. It's a long walk across Asphodel. Also be wary of Cerberus. He knows the difference between a soul and a living person. Best of luck. I folded the paper delicately. Cerberus. A feeling in my gut told me this wasn't a sick interpretation like the one Luffy had tamed on Thriller Bark. This seemed like an ideal place to hide the guard to the underworld.
Yo, quick pause, smash that like button, hit subscribe if you're new here, share this video, and tell me in the comments which part you're loving the most.
That was where I was. Erebus, souls, the Isles of the Blessed, Cerberus. It all connected to the land of the dead. It also explained the cold and the black river. It wasn't the river Chai, but the river Styx. The only missing link was Adonis, but I supposed I would know him when I saw him. I began walking, my footsteps echoing down the dark cavern. I knew I was getting close when the musty air turned even colder, my breath clearly visible as it escaped my lips. I hugged myself to keep the warmth contained within me. I rounded a corner and was met with a peculiar sight. A massive crowd of people converged together, standing in 3 lines, each branching beneath different arches. The first 2 lines were moving steadily, the people in line not speaking a word to each other as they passed. A big sign above the arches they walked under read, "Welcome to Erebus." The third line was crawling, one person at a time passing into a tent with a hooded ghoul on either side directing traffic. Here, the sign read, "Judgment Pavilion." Hermes had said to go through Erebus. But he had also said to be wary of Cerberus, and I wasn't seeing the 3-headed dog anywhere. Would he be inside the gate, or maybe on a potty break? Whatever the reason, he wasn't here, and I figured it to be best to avoid an unnecessary confrontation. I stepped into the second of the 2 Erebus lines, which seemed to be the fastest. As I slowly neared the arch, my senses went on high alert, and I stopped walking. A chill spread through me as the souls queued up behind me continued walking. I knew I had heard it, it was next to impossible not to. It came again, deeper than before, and just as menacing. An unusually hot wind blew in my face, whipping my hair from around my shoulders. Very slowly, I raised my eyes to the ceiling, pupils shrinking in surprise and horror. The creature had been mostly invisible, blending in with the darkness of the dark cavern. Until it moved. 6 eyes glared down at me, yellow irises glowing with rage and power. 3 pairs of lips curled a low growl, gobs of saliva descending down from between sharpened teeth. I swallowed nervously. Cerberus growled again, its right head lowering toward me, bringing the middle head along with it. "Good boy," I said, somehow managing to mask the weakness in my tone. "Heal." Cerberus barked, a sound equivalent to that of a grenade exploding in your ear. I clapped my hands to the sides of my head to stop the ringing. My head throbbed. I didn't have a bone or a ball for him to play with, like most dogs would enjoy. I didn't have a giant piece of meat besides myself to chew on. My brain scrambled to come up with some sort of remedy to this situation. "Cerberus-san," I tried. "I would very much appreciate it if you let me pass. GRRRRRRRRRROOWWWWWL." "No, okay then. GRRRRRRRRR." I could see no other alternative. I raised my arms, crossing my wrists over my chest in preparation to subdue the monster. When suddenly, my memory database recovered a file I had stored long ago, a plausible solution to my problem. "Hello, Cerberus-san," I called sweetly. "Do you like music?" All 3 pairs of ears twitched, nostrils dilating. "Listen, I think you'll like it." I prayed I would remember the words to the old and forgotten Oharan lullaby. "When the sun rises in the sky, look to the knowledge tree. When you lay down to bed at night, look to the knowledge tree. The knowledge tree knows you. And you know the knowledge tree. No one likes to be alone. Not even the knowledge tree." I wasn't the best vocalist on the Grand Line, but Cerberus seemed to think I was. The massive dog blinked, ears perked and eyes trained on me. I had his undivided attention. I wasn't sure what the signals meant, but I was happy with them. I wasn't being eaten. Look to the knowledge tree. It's here, it's now, open your eyes. To the knowledge tree. Right here, right now, explore. Among the wonders of the knowledge tree. And learn from its wise lessons. Open your mind to the knowledge tree. Cerberus opened all 3 of his mouths in a wide yawn, hot breath blowing my hair from my face. The eyes drooped, tongues lolling. A crash and rumbling of the ground told me the guard dog of the underworld had sat down, massive paws appearing from nowhere as me moved to lay down. Almost too late did I realize that he was falling on top of me. I bolted for the Erebus sign and the monster crashed down behind me. The blast from the giant body settling on the hard ground rocketed me forward, tumbling like a weed toward the entrance. The other ghoulish guards ran toward him, trying to figure out the problem with their main force. I somehow regained my footing, wincing as small shots of pain raced up my leg. As I passed through the gate, alarms blared, lights flashing. I left it all behind, racing into Asphodel. I dared not look back. The field I found myself in stretched as far as I could see. The black grass had been trampled by eons of dead feet, an occasional black trunk tree visible as I moved past. Souls moved silently past me, not trying to talk but just looking like, well, death. I must have sprained an ankle during my tumble, so I dragged it along behind me with a makeshift walking stick stolen from a tree. My eyes were set on a sort of golden glow on the horizon, where I was almost certain the fields of Elysium were. My database told me the place was where all the good souls went when they died, and I had no doubt Zoro's soul was the purest of the pure, granted that he had taken a life or 2. I finally grew so impatient that I dropped my walking stick and discarded the pain, my feet slamming against the hard packed earth beneath me. Wait for me. Chapter 14. Living is a privilege. When you realized you were no match for me, you should have run. And yeah, I have some things I don't want to cut, but I'll just ask. Have you ever encountered a wild animal that you can guarantee will never bite? A person. I haven't. Roranoa Zoro. Zoro Pa. Well, for being alone in this dark cavern, where I couldn't even see my hand in front of my face, and believe me, I'd tried, I was actually kind of comfortable, despite the dank and musty air, condensation forming on my forehead. Goosebumps traveled up my arms, and I rubbed them to drive away the chills. I wasn't sure if my eyes were open or closed. My back was pressed against something cold and rough, worn away like someone else had leaned on this very spot. Having found myself here with no whoop to do, I somehow managed not to go insane. Man goes insane when confined in a dark space for extended periods of time, but I wasn't going to fall for it. My instincts told me to keep up my guard, but maybe I was already insane, and it was just the madness talking. I wasn't sure where the instinct came from, though. Or these numbers on my arm. They glowed green and ticked by steadily. I passed the times by watching them. When I first discovered them, they had read 3 hours 52 minutes and 29 seconds. Now it only had about an hour and a half left. I didn't know what they were for, but I had a feeling in my gut told me I wouldn't like whatever happened when it finally struck zero. I felt my way toward the sound of trickling water, the only noise besides my own labored breathing. I cupped my hands and lowered them into the cool liquid, the sensation sending waves of tingles up my arms as if reminding me of my existence. I longed to drink the water, but I didn't. For some reason, I knew I shouldn't. Because it was poisonous. Because it wasn't really water but a river of blood. Because it was salt water. Whatever the reason, it was dangerous. Damn it, I sighed aloud to myself, my voice reverberating around the hollow cave. I allowed the liquid to drip between my fingers and returned to the stream until nothing remained. I felt my way back to the rock I had claimed, my only source of light, the glowing integers on my forearm. I resumed my usual time killer by watching the numbers slowly tick by. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 59. 3 hours, 42 minutes, 59 seconds, I said aloud, making myself comfortable as possible on the rocky ground. My eyes drooped, the trickling water driving out the silent ringing in my ears. The lullaby was soft and pretty, lulling me into a daze. 29, 28, 27. 5,996, 5,997, 5,998, 5,999, 6,000. Excellent work, Kenshi-san. I put down my weights, looking over my shoulder with narrowed eyes. It's nothing, she smiled, flicking her deep ebony hair from her blue oculars as she approached. Sometimes I think you do it on purpose. Do what? 6,000 curls every day on the deck in plain sight of Miss Navigator and I, she specified with a light smirk on her lips, sitting in her usual deck chair casually. She crossed her legs at the knee and selected a book from the diverse stack on the table next to her. Showing off. That's none of your business, I grumbled, rubbing a towel over my skin to cleanse it of sweat. I can't let my body get weak, and there's not enough room on this ship for privacy. Her cerulean orbs studied me coyly like I was some sort of exotic specimen under a microscope. Do you have any weaknesses under those rippling pectorals? She queried. What? She didn't repeat herself, knowing full well I had heard her clearly. I found the question a bit offensive, and I pondered on how to answer her. She had only just joined the group, and by our leader's way of life we were officially nakama. But that didn't stop me from not trusting her in the slightest, which means I didn't have to tell her anything. No, I finally replied, settling on the simplest and most concise choice. No trick knees whatsoever. No sudden discs. No, I repeated sharply, ending the interview firmly and quitting the place, my destination the men's room for a shower. I could hear her light giggling behind me, and I grimaced tightly. Damn woman trying to loosen me up. Gonna get under my skin and kill me from the inside like an incurable virus. I knew we shouldn't have let her join us. The water ran over my skin, washing away any residue the towel had neglected to remove. I sat in the narrow tub, closing my eyes and letting myself drift into meditation. My mind cleared of any thought, my breathing slowing in sync with my heart. My wet hair tickled my forehead a bit. Water stuck in my eyelashes. Barely a minute seemed to pass before a violent rocking shook the room, soapy water sloshing over the sides of the tub. Who the hell is causing such a ruckus? I growled, dressing myself and opening the door. Hey, I yelled, can't you morons? Watch out. My reflexes took over, leaping into a forward barrel roll to avoid a foot flying out of nowhere to repel the black iron sphere that was about to blast the bathroom to smithereens. The cannonball went flying back to its source, yells of men reaching my ears as it shattered the main hull of the enemy ship that has anchored next to us. Oi, cook, I yelled angrily, whirling around to face the owner of the foot. You trying to kill me? He tapped his black-toed boot on the deck, lifting his lighter to the fresh cigarette dangling from his lips. The world wouldn't miss you if I did, shitty Marimo. Say that again, bastard. He stuffed his hands in his pockets, putting his face right up close to mine. The world wouldn't miss you if I did, shitty Marimo. This is not the time for fighting. A female voice screeched. Take your frustrations out on those guys over there. Hi. He noodled away. TCH, I scoffed, drawing two of my katana. The blades hummed in my hands, thirsty for battle. I was itching for a fight, anyway. My meditation had been interrupted, and that wasn't the best thing to do. Not to mention Arrow Cook's pathetic attempts at insults had soured my mood further, and I needed something or someone to take it out on. They'll do nicely, I reasoned with a maniacal grin. Men fell beneath my swords, their screams of pain like music in my ears. A little demented I reasoned, but my katana thrived in my hands, and I would not deny them. They whirled and slashed and cut in a complex dance, moving in time with each other and my body to vent their restlessness on the victims. The soft side of me felt sorry for the poor bastards. The cold side wanted to bathe in their blood. I turned to attack the next victim, only to find there were none. They had all been annihilated. I sheathed my protesting swords as a flash of red suddenly entered my vision. Someone began to pound on my back obnoxiously, a wild grin curling his lips. A tick mark appeared on my forehead. Oi, we kicked their asses, didn't we? We did, I said dangerously, a warning for the raven-haired boy to stop touching me. He didn't, so I elbowed him in the gut. He didn't seem to notice, but he did finally cease poking me, instead going to slap the blonde in my stead. I smirked. Hey, where's, was all she had to say before Blondie erupted into shrieks, our raven-haired leader jumping back at the cook's sudden movement. Gia, where's my lovely goddess? He screamed, hands grabbing at his hair as his one visible eye scanned the piles of bodies around us. I did a head count, groaning inwardly. The damn woman was missing. Long Nose, Witch, Arrow Cook, Doctor, Swordsman, and Straw Hat were all accounted for. Did she finally betray us? I wouldn't be surprised if she had, but considering we had just fought off Marines, I doubted she had switched alliances quite so quickly. That's when something bonked against the side of the boat. It was only a small think, but it was enough for me to hear, being the close to the railing. I peered over the edge and noticed a small lavender shoe. A woman's, maybe a size 8. Had we fought any female Marines? Wait, hadn't she been wearing those shoes? With a curse, I unstrapped my katana and put them on the deck, placing a boot on the rail. Ignoring the shouts of my companions, I dove into the water, the salt stinging my eyes. If she had fallen or been pushed didn't matter to me. Her body hitting the water had been camouflaged among those of the enemies, and who knows how long ago it was. Why should I even care about this woman? She had practically taken a spot among us without the consent of the rest of us, but his word was the only thing she needed. She would betray us someday, so why the hell should I even save her if she's a danger to us? Because Dartboard would never let me live it down. Because our leader would flip off on me. Or was it something else? I was beginning to run out of air when I finally spotted the bright colors of her tank top. Her hair blended with the darkness of the ocean, rippling gracefully with the light currents. Bubbles escaped her slightly parted lips. I grabbed at her outstretched hand, pulling her limp body to mine before kicking for the surface, my lungs burning. My instincts told me to leave her to die and save myself, but my hands wouldn't let go, like the way her body folded into my chest was perfect. I grit my teeth and continued kicking. With a gasp, I broke the surface, spluttering excess water from my eyes and nose. Her head was on my shoulder, her hair plastered to her face and sticking to my own skin. I shifting her body to my shoulder as a ladder hit the water next to me. I scaled it easily, coming up on the deck of our ship and turning over the woman to the reindeer. He wasted no time performing chest compressions, Arrow Cook's volunteering falling on deaf ears. It wasn't long before she coughed, the expelled water from her lungs trickling down her chin. The entire crew collectively sighed with relief. She opened her eyes, those mysterious orbs finding the only other person soaked to the skin. Namely, me, off to the side wringing out my shirt. Thank you, Kenshi-san, she whispered, her voice a bit hoarse. I dipped my head. Love Cook would have killed me if I hadn't. Don't talk to a woman that way, shitty Marimo. And who are you calling a love cook? You, dartboard eyebrow. Thank you, Zoro. 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 My eyes cracked open, a bubble of snot popping all over my face. I raised my arm to wipe it away, casting a quick glance at the numbers. Holy shit, I whispered. Since when has it been down to 10 minutes? Zoro. The yell came again, faint, distorted, somewhere to my left. I looked to where the word was coming from, moving to my hands and knees. I could somewhat distinguish the voice as feminine, but I hadn't heard any other voice besides my own, so it was difficult to tell. Zoro, if you're there, please answer. Oh, so Zoro was a name. Was it mine? I crawled toward the source, feeling my way across the craggy floor. I stopped when my fingers jammed against the wall. Wincing slightly, I placed my palm against the rock that encompassed my prison. I was sure the voice had come from here. It was so frantic, so anxious, that I compared it to an employee, already on probation, being late for work. But I also detected a hint of desperation. Stand back, another voice put in, this one deeper than the first. A man, I'll have to break the rock. Please, hurry. My mind may be scrambled, but I could at least figure out the, stand back, also applied to me. My feet moved quickly, running backward and carrying me away from the source. A pounding not coming from me echoed in the chamber. Cracks of light appeared through the darkness like lightning bolts against a stormy sky. I sudden tripped on a loose stone below my feet and falling on my rear with a crash, the back of my head cracking against the compact rock. Stars danced across my vision, and I rolled onto my stomach as a tremendous crash roared in my ears, blinding while light streaming into the cave and rendering my burning eyes sightless. Zoro. The first voice was much more distinct, definitely female. I could see her silhouette through my fingers as she raced toward me. I groaned as the light murdered eyes that hadn't observed daylight in hours or even days. She skidded to a halt, her breathing heavy like she'd run a marathon. Through my half-blinded eyes I looked up toward her, still unable to distinguish her features. Adonis-kun. Did Aphrodite say he would be back in his body? How would I know? You're the one that talked to her. She just said he'd be waiting for me. Who cares if he's in his body or not? Fact is that it's saved you the trouble of figuring it out. She seemed to agree with this statement and knelt next to me, her gentle hands wrapping tentatively around my shoulders as if she were afraid I would disappear the moment she looked away. She blocked the streaming light with her body to help my eyes adjust. How do you feel? It took me a moment to register she had been talking to me. I blinked, squinting up at her features. Damn, she was beautiful. Coal black hair framed her elegant face, and bright knowledgeable blue eyes stared me down like she didn't actually believe I was here in the flesh. Her hands were slender, long fingers clenched around my shoulders. Her boobs were enormous, but respectfully concealed behind a white sheet. She looked exactly like the woman from the dream I had just woken up from, but the mischievous look from the dream was replaced by one of love and championship. I felt like I knew her, but... Who are you? She blinked, a look of confusion on her radiant features. What? Don't you recognize me? Should I? Maybe I should mention, said the other male voice from before. He appeared behind the woman, only wearing a loincloth around his hips. His dark eyes were framed by a shock of shaggy brown hair, arms crossed over a muscular chest. What's wrong, Adonis-kun? If this is the guy, and Aphrodite is the one that sent him here. Then what? The man's eyes grew distant. Then he probably won't remember who he is. The hurt that came over her stabbed me right through the heart. Her gaze locked on mine. Is that true? I avoided her eyes, crossing my legs beneath me. The fabric of my pants itched against my skin. Yes, I confirmed for her quietly. I don't know who you are, where this place is or who I am. I'm sorry. Chapter 15 Interlocked Souls. I'm going to be the world's strongest swordsman. All I have left is my destiny. My name may be infamous, but it's gonna shake the world. Roronoa Zoro. Zoro Pav. I wasn't sure what to make of my dilemma. She was hugging me, this random woman who knew me, and yet I didn't know her. The simple idea of close contact with a complete stranger, when I was a stranger to myself, was a bit out of my comfort zone. So I put the heels of my hands against her shoulders and gently pushed her away, her arms willingly unraveling from around my shoulders. She didn't resist, instead allowing her hands to fall to her sides. But after a moment, she raised a hand and put it against my chest, right over where my heart would be. I'm not sure what she felt, or didn't feel, because tears began to form in her eyes. I had upset her in some way, this person, and I did not want that feeling hanging over my shoulders. Your heart, she whispered. Don't touch me, I said, shuffling away from her a bit. She watched me without saying anything, though the hurt was evident in her eyes. It shouldn't have killed me, but it did. Subconsciously I put my own hand to my chest, somehow not surprised to feel no sign of true life pumping beneath my skin. The other man produced a torch, roaming the circumference of the room and completely disregarding the woman and I's interactions. She pushed a stray hair from her face, and I noticed the inside of her arm. It shone a light purple, definitely strange. I took a step toward her, grabbing her wrist and yanking her toward me, my movements desperate and urgent. She gasped as she stumbled forward, but didn't resist, allowing me to compare our forearms. As I had suspected, there were ticking numbers on the soft white flesh. Both our times were the exact same, ticking one number at the exact same time, the only difference being hers was purple and mine shone a mint green. 0 hours 3 minutes and 24 seconds. Do all humans have this? I asked. She reclaimed her arm, rubbing the place where I had grabbed her. No, just us. Why? It's a timer, she said slowly. I could see the gears in her mind turning, choosing her words carefully. And we need to do something before it reaches 0. Do something. I was confused. If she and I were the only two people with the timer, did that mean we were related? Who are you anyway? I'm not doing anything with a stranger, much less a woman. She didn't appear to be fazed by my rising tone and snapping words. Maybe she knew what it was like to have strangers demand the impossible of her. Zoro, she murmured, stepping forward and putting her hands on my shoulders. I moved to pick them away, but 2 more arms suddenly grew from my back and pinned my arms by my sides. Holy shit, I yelled, struggling against their vice-like grip. What the? Your name is Roronoa Zoro, she interrupted, forcing our eyes to meet. Her voice was soft and gentle, yet controlling. I shut my mouth and tried not to look at the disembodied limbs. With every ensuing word, she stepped forward, forcing me to take a step back. You're a Santoryu swordsman and first mate for the Straw Hat Pirates, captained by Monkey D. Luffy. You have a bounty of 120 million Baileys and dream of defeating Hawkeye Dracula Mahawk and becoming the greatest swordsman in the world. Damn. At first I figured this badass guy couldn't possibly be me, locked up in this godforsaken cavern. But I couldn't tear my gaze from hers. I detected no falsity in those captivating orbs of hers. Water sloshed around my feet as I was forced into the stream, the chilling liquid swirling around my ankles. The woman followed, not seeming to notice if drops of water splashed on her sheet. For the briefest moment, her eyes were cast down to the water, as if confirming something. I opened my mouth to tell her to go away, but she wasn't done, raising her azure eyes once again to meet mine. My name is Nico Robin, she continued, moving her hands from my shoulders to the back of my neck. I'm an archaeologist of the Straw Hat Pirates. We are Nakama. I have an 80 million belly bounty and am constantly hunted by the world government. I dream of locating the Rio Poneglyph and learning the true history. That's pretty ambitious, I muttered. She smiled, obviously amused with my comment. Speak for yourself. Oi, Robin, Adonis said from somewhere in the darkness. You have 30 seconds until sunrise and your timer runs out. The woman, Robin, didn't hesitate. She shoved me backward, tripping on a loose stone and sending me splashing into the water. It soaked through my clothes and hair instantly, sending goosebumps across my skin. I tried to sit up, but 2 more disembodied limbs kept me down. It only increased my struggles, those things were scaring the shit out of me. 20 seconds. She straddled me, her knees on either side of my waist as she leaned down over me, the ends of her hair tickling my nose. Our chests pressed together, but I made no move to eject Robin from above me. The limbs vanished in a puff of petals, the brief scent of lilacs disappearing with the current. 15 seconds. What are you doing? I demanded of her, but the harshness of my tone didn't seem as threatening as I wanted them to be. Rather, it seemed more questioning and curious, and, to my horror, a bit lustful. She held a finger to my lips, the universal sign to be silent. Just relax, she whispered. And hope this works. What works? 5 seconds. 4, 3. No more questions, she whispered, small tears leaking from her eyes. Was she sad? It was impossible to tell. Her expression was unreadable, like trying to read a book only by looking at the front cover. There was a basic idea, but the reader would have no idea of the structure or the author's style, no picture of the characters or plot or setting. 2 seconds. 1. Her face came right up close to mine, our lips lightly touching in a sweet butterfly kiss, sending tingles down my back not influenced by the water, which for some reason was glowing a soft sea green. I figured after the blooming limbs, nothing could freak me out anymore, but the glow was a little creepy. Her eyes were closed, her warm breath on my face. I felt my own eyes drooping closed, raising my head up from the water to meet her. Zero. XXX. Don't talk like that after you beat me. Tears stained her cheeks, shining in the glinting light of unsheathed katana. Zoro, she whispered, her deep blue eyes finding the irate 10-year-old boy she had just defeated for the 2001st time. That's despicable. You've been my goal the whole time. Whether you're a man or a woman, is that what you're gonna say when I finally defeat you? As if it wasn't because of my skills. It makes me, who's been training all this time, this hard, look like a fool. Don't talk like that. She blinked at him in surprise. He took a step toward her, eyes glaring. Promise me that one day, one of us will be the world's greatest swordsman. There was a fire burning in his eyes, a fire that spoke of the depth and meaning behind his words. His sweaty green hair stuck to his forehead, but the young swordsman didn't appear to notice or even care. His onyx oculars were locked on her as he raised his hand, fingers extended and awaiting her. She couldn't stop the tears, but his words buried themselves deep within her heart. She smiled. Stupid, saying that when you're weak. She took his calloused hand in her own, their pact witnessed by the light of the full moon. It's a promise. XXX. My mind was ablaze with thoughts and images that made absolute no sense. Maybe it was the familiarity of the girl in my vision. Kuina. I remembered her name. I remembered the taste of tears after learning of her death, the firm grip of the Wado Ikimonji in my young hands for the first time. The hands of the man who would one day become the world's greatest swordsman. Or maybe it was Robin's soft lips on mine that fueled these emotions. Her lips tasted of cherries, faint, like she hadn't applied recently. She respectfully kept her tongue in her own mouth, and I was too stunned to do anything but lay there and return the kiss hesitantly as more of what I knew were memories flooded my mind. XXX. Luffy-san is completely serious. He's going to become the Pirate King and find the ultimate treasure, the One Piece. He looked at the pink-haired youth incredulously, not quite believing his words. This scrawny punk would become the Pirate King. PFT, yeah right. The toughest pirates in the world were after that title, and none of them would go down without a fight. How could this childish and lanky boy possibly rank among those legends? Well, take them then. The skinny raven-haired teen extended the 3 swords towards him, the brightest of smiles on his face. But if we fight together, you'll owe me. His tone turned mischievous, like he already knew what the other man would say. Being killed by Marines or coming with me, which one do you pick? You're the son of the devil. The bound man couldn't help but laugh, despite the lack of energy in his limbs. Anyone he had just met would be put off by his apparent dim-witted personality at first glance, but with a deeper conversation with the guy, he was actually cunning when it came to getting what he wanted. Fine, I'd rather be a pirate than die here. Great, you'll be my first nakama. The younger teen shouted triumphantly, his grin possibly even brighter than before. Great, now quit celebrating and get these ropes off. Luffy. Oi, wake up, we're leaving. He flinched beneath his captain's slapping of his head, slowing sitting up and holding his head to cease the spinning of his vision. He was still suffering from blood loss due to that damn acrobat's pathetic attacks. Did we finish everything? Yeah, and we got ourselves a navigator called Nami, and we even got a chart of the Grand Line. Luffy said like he'd already conquered the most dangerous sea in the world. He glared at the girl who had just assumed the position of navigator over his shoulder, standing there like she had just witnessed a ghost. Kabaji lay several feet behind her, the wound on his chest bleeding profusely. In her hand was a rope that held several squirming body parts together, but she appeared to have forgotten about them. She watched her two new crewmates with mixed emotions. He didn't have long to observe her, however, because he was suddenly overcome with lightheadedness. I'm not sure about this, I don't feel so good. Of course you wouldn't, not after losing that much blood. She screeched. His head throbbed. Nami. I'll see you again someday. Luffy leaned over the railing, his eyebrows raised confusedly. Why? The long-nosed teen echoed, just as confused. You're really slow, aren't you? I'll be a pirate just like you, so we might meet at the sea one day. He crossed his arms, pointing at the deck with his usual tense expression. What are you talking about? He asked, smirking at the younger man's face. Hurry up and get on. We're already nakama, Luffy elaborated simply like it was the most obvious thing in the world. The next minute consisted of a staring contest between the three men, with Nami and the blonde princess looking happily on, until realization of his and Luffy's words finally registered. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me, the author is, the stuff of legends by 1004 Angel. I'm the captain, he yelled, fist pumping the air. Don't be stupid, Usopp, I'm the captain. Usopp. Santor Yui, Sanzan Sakai. Time froze as the two swordsmen clashed, the ring of steel on steel screeching in the audience's ears. The older man's cloak billowed out behind him, his black blade raised and dripping with the blood of his opponent, who stood behind him with his back facing toward him, still holding the finishing stance of his final move. A stab of pain flashed across his chest as a new wound spurted blood, staining his already ruined shirt. The weight in his hands suddenly vanished as the two katana shattered, the shards clicking against the wooded deck. The sudden loss overbalanced him and he swayed like a drunkard, catching himself before he could topple in defeat. With a shaking hand, he removed the white sword Wado Ikimonji from his mouth and sheathed it under the hawk-like gaze of his opponent beneath the wide brim of his hat. The expression he bore was of acceptance, of his defeat and most likely his impending death, though it was masked by an unreadable emotion that could possibly be defined as disappointment, as if he had let down an old friend. He rose firmly, facing the champion of their duel. The man's eyes widened as the defeated swordsman raised his arms, exposing his bleeding chest. What now? The Shishibukai queried, his black blade still raised. He smiled through the pain, his eyes alight with a fire akin to that of hell. Attacks from behind are a swordsman's shame, he said wisely. The other chuckled and shifted his stance, understanding the younger man's implied desire. Well said. In one fluid motion, the black blade flashed once again through the air, the horrible sound of ripping flesh accompanying it, followed by a violent spray of blood. Zoro! A voice screamed. The swordsman fell backward in what felt like slow motion, his katana falling from his limp hands as red liquid poured in torrents from his wounded mouth, staining his chin. The anguished screams of the onlookers ceased to exist, except for one, a newer voice he hadn't quite gotten to know completely yet. It's simple. Abandon your ambitions and live. TCH. What right did a second-rate cook have to give him advice when he was about to die? The water closed over his head and body as he plunged into the ocean, the salt making his wound burn even more. It wasn't long until he came to, finding himself floating on a small sailboat with Johnny, Yosaku, and Usopp's worried voices mumbling in desperation. He regained enough consciousness to hear the master swordsman yell, "It's still too early for you to die. My name is Dracula Mahawk. Find your true self, true world, become stronger. No matter how long it will take, I will wait you in my strongest form. Surpass this sword, surpass me, Roronoa Zoro. Mahawk. Her cool look is still so charming." The newest addition to the crew exploded into an inferno of hearts and flailing limbs. "Hey, Nami Swan, it's me, remember me. Let's go on a cruise together, just you and me. You just stay out of his." He growled, a tick mark appearing on his forehead. "You'll only complicate things. What did you say?" The cook returned, suddenly all calm and collected, but infused with the burning passion of affection and anger. "My love is always a hurricane." He ignored curly brow and turned his attention to Nami. "Hey, listen to me when I'm talking to you." Who was standing a few yards away with her hip cocked casually and her eyes glaring coldly toward them, her body language clearly telling them to get the hell of her island. Where's Usopp? He demanded of their former navigator. Swimming with the fishes, she responded immediately without any sign of remorse for what she had done. Why you? He reached for his katana, all his frustration exploding at once as he ran at her. Quit your bullshit. There was a flash of yellow and black in the corner of his vision, and he skidded to a halt and, ignoring the screaming in his chest, bent over backwards to avoid having the imprint of a boot on his face. He drew his sword in retaliation, the sharp tip aimed straight for the cook, who had just lit a fresh cigarette. Do swordsmen attack women, too? Roronoa Zoro. What's that? Said swordsman growled. You don't even know what's going on, so don't interfere. Ha, the irritating blonde chuckled. After an emotional loss, of course you'd be irritable. He put his face right up close to his newest adversary, trying not to choke on the cigarette smoke. Oi, you'd better watch what you say. Mind your own business. Oi, Yosaku intervened, trying to step between the feuding men, and ultimately failing. Sanji Aniki, Zoro Aniki, don't be bickering at a time like this. He didn't back down, waiting for the other man to give in, and vice versa. This was the start of a rocky relationship, his instincts were telling him. The swordsman figured he might have to just kill this hot-headed bastard off someday. Sanji. Oi, reindeer, Luffy yelled at the top of his lungs for the umpteenth time, his voice echoing off the tall mountains. Come out, wherever you are. He face-palmed at his captain's ignorance. If the Tanuki wanted to come, then he would decide that for himself. There was no need to pressure the guy into joining, like he had been, and from experience, it wasn't the best thing in the world. As if to prove his point, the sound of crunching snow accompanied the appearance of the zone user, just as Vivi and Nami dragged an unconscious lovesick moron from inside the frozen castle. Chopper. Nami questioned the little doctor's sudden appearance. Oi, he had drawn Luffy's undivided attention. Let's be pirates together. I can't. Sure you can. Luffy argued excitedly. It's really fun. I mean, the creature hesitated, his tiny hooves shaking with either nerves or fear he couldn't tell. I mean I'm a reindeer. With antlers and hooves and, he winced. And a blue nose. There was silence as he tried to compose himself. I want to be a pirate, but I can't be nakama with humans after all. I'm a monster. Someone like me just can't be your nakama. His voice had risen until he was yelling at the Straw Hat Pirates, who took in his words without interruptions. As his rant drew to a close, his tone softened. So, I'm here. I'm here to say thanks. Thanks for the invitation. Luffy's mouth had formed a flustered frown as he absorbed the reindeer's monologue. Nami watched him sadly, as if lost in thought. I'll stay here, but, he continued, his breath coming out in small gasps as he exhaled due to the frigid weather. If you ever feel like it, come back someday and... Shut up. Luffy suddenly yelled, fist pumping the air with such force a strong wind was able to blow his straw hat from his head. Luckily Usopp was able to catch it. Let's go. Tears began to well up in the young doctor's eyes. Nami couldn't help but giggle as Luffy somehow managed to once again get his way in the most unreasonable fashion. Usopp chuckled professionally like it was all his idea, which of course, it wasn't. Sanji was still unconscious. Since when has, shut up, been an invitation? A swordsman muttered with a slight smile. Chopper. Ah, you Neanderthal. Blockhead. Marimo. Santoryu. Oi, Luffy. Santoryu, isn't an insult. Yontoryu. No, you only added one. He sighed, exasperated with his crew, running a hand through his rough green hair. It had only been a couple of hours since they'd said their goodbyes to Alabasta and its princess, and his nakama were already crying all over themselves like babies. He turned away from them with a yawn, deciding he needed to sleep off his frustrations. So we finally got away from the island. Yeah, excellent work. Mass panic ensued, involving a bullhorn, drawn swords, the clank of a Klimatak, wild running and screaming, and many bruised heads. It was to be expected. After all, the co-president of Baroque Works was on their ship. She didn't appear fazed at all by their hasty recovery, rather she appeared to enjoy it. He didn't let his guard down, not even when she reclined lazily in that lawn chair as Usopp began conducting his interview. He sat with his back pressed against the mast, his eyes shaded as he quietly absorbed the words of their resident sharpshooter and stowaway. Pay attention, Usopp demanded. She looked over from where she had been amusing Chopper and Luffy with one of her arms. I want straight up and honest answers. What's your name? Nico Robin, she answered simply. What's your occupation? Archaeologist. Are you serious? She told her story, of her bounty at only 8 years old, working for rogues and the like. He wasn't moved by her silly sob story. It was only a way to loosen them up and prepare them for the fatal blow. Usopp's tone betrayed him as vaguely curious about her experiences, but still cautious of the newest addition to the crew. What's your specialty? Usopp was clearly referring to crew positions, like lookout or shipwright. Instead, the woman rested her chin in the palm of her hand, her expression blank save for the mischievous smile that curled her lips. With the most plain and toneless voice he had ever heard, she replied, assassination. Luffy. Usopp sobbed, falling back in his chair. The interview has concluded this woman is too dangerous to be on this crew. Luffy was too busy being tickled by disembodied limbs to hear his sharpshooter. He tuned out of most of what went on next, from Nami's seduction by crocodiles, Jules and Sanji's flirtatious monologues. He talked with Usopp briefly before the sniper, too, fell victim to the woman's charms, laughing right alongside Luffy and Chopper. He sucked on his teeth in annoyance and quit the place of noise, settling for the front deck of the ship. He leaned against the railing and watched the water swirl around the Mary's hull as it cut cleanly through the ocean. "This ship has charm," said a voice, and he glared at the raven-haired woman from the corner of his eye as she ascended the steps toward him. She did not meet his eyes as she took a few extra steps away from him. This body language said she wasn't quite done with him yet, but would wait until he accepted her himself. "Is it always this lively?" "Yeah, it usually is," he heard himself respond. "Really?" She smiled, and for the briefest second, he was struck with an overwhelming sense of grace. The way she walked away from him and sat on the opposite rail near the ram figurehead, the flow of her ebony hair as it was blown by a gentle sea breeze, it was almost as if she were casting a spell on him, forcing him to admire that natural grace. He unsheathed a katana and sliced his thumb with it, the small stab of pain jerking him from the apparent trance. "This woman," he mentally growled, jutting out his bottom lip in thought. "Just what is she plotting? XXX. She pulled away briefly for a breath, the ends of her hair wet from where they had fallen into the water around me. Her eyes were bright and beautiful, the corners lifted from the wide grin on her countenance. "Zoro," she said, tasting my name on her tongue. "What?" I somehow managed to sputter through the current occasionally running over my face. "I think you can sit up now." I did so, propping myself up on my elbows so my head was at least out of the water. I looked down at my body to discover what this sudden sensation of what? What was it? I wanted to say purity, but that wasn't it. It was like starving for days, and then finally tasting your favorite meal, having the glorious feeling of it filling you up, energy rushing through your veins and feeling alive again. The glow had moved from my arm all the way across my shoulder and through my torso, the hazy line of it visible just beneath the water surface, running just over my waist. "Robin," I said, lifting my head to look at her again. "Your name is Robin." Confusion and light curiosity flickered across her features, quickly oppressed by absolute relief. "And I'm Zoro." I raised a hand in front of my face, examining each patch of rough skin on my palms. "I was raised in a dojo, Kuina and I's promised before she died, Luffy, Nami, Usopp, Sanji, Mihawk. You remember us." Her voice was so full of excitement. I looked up at her again, her cerulean orbs meeting mine. "There's still more, isn't there?" I said, sitting up completely. "More to know, more to remember." I didn't completely understand what was happening. The glow on my body still freaked me out a little, but at least I had memories now, memories that identified me, made me who I was. "Kuina. Our promise, how could I let myself forget? Never again would I let the reason for all my hard work be taken away by mere amnesia." "Speaking of, how much more do you need?" Robin whispered. I looked at her again, marveling on how the glow shone on her ebony hair, making it shine. "I bet it's soft." I raised a hand and ran it through those velvet tresses, loving the cool feel of the strands running through my fingers. She sighed with pleasure and leaned into it, not closing her eyes for a moment. "I have no idea, but I'll tell you one thing, the more I know depends on how long we do this." I pulled her toward me, crashing my lips onto hers. Instantly, the images flooded into my memory again. XXX. "Good thing we got away from the Marines," she said, opening the door and stepping into the sunlight. "Yeah," the swordsman said, rubbing the back of his neck lazily. She smiled. "Excellent work." The scene was almost an exact replica of her first introduction to the pirates, minus the princess, of course. Mass panic quickly ensued. The swordsman was pulling out his sword again. The orange-haired navigator held a strange blue tube instead of her staff, but the concept was the same. The blonde man who had defeated Mr. Two was staring at her again in a way she didn't quite find all that attractive. The long-nosed man was speaking through a megaphone, alerting the other crew members of what they already knew. The one person, well creature, she didn't recognize from their first encounter was a tiny little reindeer raccoon dog creature running back and forth across the deck, holding his hooves to the side of his head, screaming. Only the captain stood completely calm, staring at her as if trying to remember where he'd seen her before. She could see the swordsman from the corner of her eye as she set up a deck chair near the rear of the ship. He watched her, his eyes squinted nearly shut. His arms were crossed in a way that told her he wasn't going to take his eyes off her for a moment, just in case if she decided to pull something. All the better reason to, maybe, show off just a little bit. When she declared her desire to become the 7th member of the Straw Hat crew, the faces of all but the swordsman were most entertaining. The others' jaws hit the deck in a mixture of surprise, awe, and in the blonde's case, love. However, the green-haired man maintained his suspicious stance, setting himself apart from the rest of the group. Maybe he wasn't quite so stupid after all. She told the tale of the events below the castle in Alubarna, where the poneglyph was hidden. The crew listened quietly, even Luffy, for he had been unconscious near the end of it. He immediately allowed her to join after she told him of her predicament, having no place to return to. And, once again, his other members gave him grief about it. Even the swordsman showed emotion now, his grip tightening on his crossed arms. That made her slightly sad. A good sob story like her own, even if it wasn't the whole story, was enough to usually get anyone feeling sorry for her. These guys were tough. Good thing she had brought along some persuasive ideals. It didn't take long before the crew had placated and the long-nosed man was settling down for an interview. She put on a cheerful face and answered his questions truthfully. "Pay attention," the long-nosed man demanded. She looked over from where she had been amusing the reindeer and captain with one of her arms. "I want some straight-up and honest answers. What's your name?" "My name's Usopp." "Hello." She answered his question simply. "Nico Robin." "What's your occupation?" "Archaeologist." The sniper seemed interested. "Are you serious? Archaeology runs in my veins. I come from a long line of them." She cast a quick sideways glance toward the swordsman to check for any reaction. None so far, as much as she could see. However, he did seem a bit perplexed with his crew members' methods of interrogation. Still, his gaze did not waver. She told her story, of her bounty at only 8 years old. Working for rogues, and the like. The sniper and his company listened intently, seemingly surprised at her troubled childhood. Sob story number 2. Only the navigator and swordsman were left to woo. Their expressions practically screamed at her, "I don't trust you." "What's your specialty?" the sniper asked. She leaned her chin in her hand. "Assassination," she said simply, a straight face on her elegant face. "Play the tough girl card." She wasn't exactly sure how the crew operated, but it was good to put it out there while she had the chance. She had taken lives before, mostly under the orders of Mr. Zero or other various rogues. It didn't mean she liked doing it. The sniper panicked humorously, falling back in his chair. "I have determined this woman is far too dangerous to have in this crew." The navigator kicked the side of the ship, her eyes hard as steel. "Seriously. I'm disappointed, you two are pathetic. She was the vice president of a crime syndicate until today. And you really think someone like that should join us?" The sniper began to clap his hands, glad he had found a supporter. "You may have fooled these idiots," the woman continued, staring her in the eye. "But I'm not convinced." She smiled up at the orange-haired navigator. "All right, I'll keep that in mind." It was time for the trump card of persuasion. "Oh, I just remembered. I took some of Crocodile's gold with me." The navigator was at her side in an instant, his eyes twinkling at the thought of treasure, or anything shiny for that matter. "Oh wow, sister, you're the best." She squealed. "Here we go," the sniper and swordsman said in unison. The two moved away to speak privately for a moment. She grew an ear to the back of the sniper, listening on the conversation. "Nami's been had," the sniper muttered. Note to self, the navigator is Nami. "This chick's bad news," the swordsman agreed. The blonde man with the strange eyebrow suddenly swooned over her, releasing a ballad from his lips like honey. It was a sweet sentiment, and she was impressed by the true emotion he put into it. He set a cup of steaming tea in front of her. He was the cook. Sanji was his name, if memory served. Judging from his actions so far in her encounters with him before, he was a woman-loving gentleman, and wouldn't need any persuading of her trustworthiness. "Look at him," the swordsman growled. "Falling all over himself." "Well," the sniper agreed. "He was a lost cause from the get-go. Looks like you and I are the only holdouts on this ship of insanity," the swordsman said, his voice lowering. "We shouldn't blame the others. Their simple minds can't resist our charms." She couldn't agree more. The captain called out the long-nosed man's name, showing him his imitation of the reindeer, whose name she learned was Chopper. The sniper soon fell into hysterics, laughing alongside his friends. 5 down, 1 to go. She watched as the green-haired swordsman rolled his eyes and moved away from the rest of the crew, walking up the stairs to the bow of the ship. She had yet to win him over, in more ways than one. She stood up and followed him to the deck, leaving the cook sighing to himself on the floor. He was leaned against the railing, staring out over the horizon. The sea wind blew stray hairs of green gently about his face, a look in his eyes hazy as if he were deep in thought. The sound of her shoes on the stairs drew his attention, and he watched her suspiciously as she stood close, but not so close as to make him uncomfortable. "This ship has charm. Is it always this lively?" she asked, turning to face him. He stared back at her. There was something in his charcoal orbs that spoke to her. His guard was still up, but he wasn't on the offensive anymore. He couldn't change his captain's decision any more than she could, and he was accepting that. "Yeah," he said, "usually is." She smiled, content with his answer, and turned to face the oncoming horizon. It looked like she had found an interesting group of pirates. XXX. What was that? I murmured, breaking our contact with a confused stare. She looked at Mike quizzically. What was what? I stared at the raven-haired beauty, searching her face for anything I could use to make sense of what had just went through my head. "It was you," I managed. "Your side, your memory." She seemed just as intrigued. "Well, perhaps," she philosophized. "A door once opened can be stepped through in either direction. What the hell is that supposed to mean?" I muttered, scratching my head. It means that I've been watching the memories flood back into your mind, she admitted slowly, blushing slightly. So that's how you got caught up in the Straw Hats. And I never would have thought you actually have faced Mihawk before. Irritation built up inside me. That's all private, I said, not a word. And, be quiet, she sighed, and connected our lips once again. XXX. You need not worry. The false god laughed, his abnormally lengthy earlobes jiggling as he threw his head back, his smile full of malcontent. I've already accounted for the golden bell. When I think back on your movements, there is only one place it could be. The raven-haired woman's eyes widened, a sudden wind blowing strands of hair over her elegant countenance. He glanced over at her from where he stood beside her, wondering what on earth could be going on inside that mysterious woman's head. Whatever it was, it certainly had her riled up. He hadn't seen that look in her eyes before. What the hell was this golden bell, anyway? I suspect that it is in the same place you deduced, Enel continued, his eyes roving up the massive stalk of giant jack. How unexpected. Did you think that you could take advantage of me with that information? Robin's eyes were cast down as if she were ashamed. But he detected no such emotion on her features. As usual, her thoughts and feelings were surrounded by a black veil of mystery. How injudicious of you, the supposed god said, raising his hand with his index finger extended. I hate manipulative women, when they butt their noses in where they don't belong. A silent scream was shared among them, the angry Shandorian warrior, the cowering navigator cradling an unconscious doctor, the swordsman turning in what felt like slow motion, his eyes for the briefest of seconds meeting those of the raven-haired woman a few feet from him. Crackling electricity danced across Enel's entire body, the air around him hissing. The light was blinding, reflecting in his onyx orbs. The single bolt of lightning harboring 20,000 volts of electricity fried the air, cut off only by the scream of pain ripping itself from Robin's throat. Her skin turned black as burnt charcoal, the whites of her eyes clearly visible as the bolt was sent straight through her forehead and protruding out the other side, her brain taking the direct hit. The lightning vanished in the blink of an eye, leaving the archaeologist falling backward limply. His body moved on its own. An incurable rage boiled up inside him, the fire in his eyes increasing its power to that of a raging inferno as adrenaline suddenly pumped into his veins. He fanned his swords out to either side, slicing even the air itself. Somehow managing to not slice the falling body, he swept his arm beneath her, Robin's wounded form nestling perfectly in the crook of his elbow. Her head fell back limply as she lost consciousness, a light wind from the shockwave ruffling her hair and blowing her darkened hat further away from its owner. He gently lowered her to the ground, taking a brief second to position her comfortably before the fury boiled inside him again, and he faced the false god with such an intense look, even Enel's eyes widened a fraction of a degree. She's a woman, the swordsman said harshly. Enel appeared to overcome his initial surprise, his lips pulling back into a sinister smirk. I can tell, he said. He snapped. The green-haired man sprang to his feet, his two katana screaming for vengeance. He ran at the long-eared man, the blades positioned parallel to one another in preparation for his attack. Enel readied his staff, situating it just in time to block his first strike, deflecting the blade to the right. But he was strong, and held his stance, the steel blade screeching as it clung to the golden pole. You possess talent, Enel said, his tone amused. And you're completely insane, he countered, bringing his other blade around to decapitate his opponent. Enel gracefully dodged the attack, lifting himself up into the air and over the Watto's thirsty blade. He heard the light click of a bazooka in firing formation, and he attempted to scramble away from the oncoming attack. Burn bazooka. The light that followed blinded him, and he looked away to protect his eyes. When he finally felt like it was safe to look, he returned his attention to the battle, only to find Enel had wrapped his electric hands around each of his two blades, rendering them useless. His muscles strained as they tried to pull free. Having every sliver of hope dashed is the same as dying. The false god philosophized, his eyes glowing white with the electricity pumping through his veins. The white spread across his steel swords, traveling through the hilt and up his arms. The electricity passed through him, frying his nerves and causing the powerful swordsman to scream out in pain. No words could describe the way his body felt at that very moment. But at one moment of clarity, all he could think was, I'm sorry, Robin. I couldn't do anything. I don't have anything against her, the Marine Admiral stated. The only reason I know her is because she escaped from me once. But that was a long time ago. His gaze moved from one Straw Hat pirate to the next, looking them over with a critical eye. You'll learn soon enough that protecting that woman leads to regret. And if you doubt me, know this, that every organization Nico Robin has joined until now has been annihilated. Aokiji stood as he spoke the last few words, his piercing eyes on the Devil's Child. Not one member escaped, except her. And why is that, Nico Robin? Robin recoiled at his statements, the tremors in her azure orbs clearly reflecting her fear and discomfort with his words. He couldn't help but wonder, as he watched her, how easily this man affected her. This woman, who stayed completely calm when faced with an entire army, whose eyes would light up with joy if they came across ruins on any islands they came across. What dark shadows haunted her past, terrifying enough for her to cringe even at the mere sight of one man? Stop it, Luffy yelled, obviously picking up on Robin's discomfort as well. The past has nothing to do with us. That's right, Usopp added, his knees trembling despite his brave face. If it did, then we wouldn't have a former pirate hunter or this ex-thief woman on our crew. Watch it, bub, Nami threatened, her warning followed by a rough glare from said former pirate hunter. Today is more important than the past, Sanji added coolly. Robin is one of our nakama. Chopper insisted. Don't talk bad about her. He glanced at the archaeologist again, fingering the hilt of Yubashiri. She was clearly conflicted with her crewmates' words, her lips curved in a deep frown but her eyes were strong, even through the desperation picking at that wall. Her body began to shake. I see, said Aokiji thoughtfully. The poor fools don't suspect a thing. Robin finally snapped, crossing her arms in front of her chest. He recognized that stance as the one she assumed when she was about to use her devil fruit abilities. Her pupils shrank in her anger and fear, eyebrows furrowed. What do you want with me? She cried. If you want to arrest me, then why not just do it? Trying to flare. 30 of her disembodied arms bloomed from the ground, wrapping themselves around the admiral's lanky form. Robin, don't, Usopp yelled. My, Aokiji mumbled through the hands wrapped around his chin and throat. Did I say too much? What a shame. I must have overestimated how reasonable a woman you were. Clutch. His body bent into a bone-breaking backbend, his midsection turning into ice and traveling through his entire form just as the attack was completed. The hands dissipated, leaving behind nothing but a pile of jagged ice. Ah! Chopper squealed in fright. He disintegrated and died. Collected gasps were shared among the pirates, their eyes bugging from their heads as the marine began to reform right in front of them. First his head and shoulders were reconstructed into an ice sculpture, followed soon by his torso and arms and finally his legs. No, Usopp whispered. It didn't work. Oi, run for your lives. No one moved. Well, that was a downright mean thing to do, Aokiji muttered, his newly constructed body finally reforming directly in front of Robin, who had maintained her stance throughout his rebirth. The woman didn't appear to be surprised at his regeneration, rather, she seemed to have been expecting it. Aokiji knelt and grabbed a handful of grass stalks between his feet. Throwing them into the air, he quickly let out a cold breath. The green blades instantly froze with the water in the air, forming in a split second a shining broadsword made of solid ice. The admiral wielded his weapon, displaying it to the pirates with the words, Ice Saber. I wasn't planning on killing you, but... The ice sword began to descend rapidly towards Robin, who only had time to cross her arms in preparation for an attack before it would end her days. She closed her eyes, waiting for the blow that would remove all her pain, take her from this world. He didn't know what to do at that very moment, watching the blade as if in slow motion. His gut told him to let the woman die. He hadn't wanted her to join in the first place. But he had grown on her the past few weeks they had been together, much to his own disappointment. Whether it had been a part of her plan or not, he had no idea, but if it had been, then she was a damn good strategist. Besides, he couldn't let someone die, not when he had the ability to stop it. The Wado Ikimonji, Kuina's sword, unsheathed itself, its hilt nestling in the familiar palm of his hand. His legs kicked into action, bringing his body forward just in time to leap directly in the path of the ice saber. He raised his katana, his muscles jarring as the impact raced through his arms, the screech of ice on steel ringing in his ears. He glared up at the Marine Admiral, who met his eyes calmly, his features unreadable. He would protect this person. His loyalty told him that. But something deep down inside him told him it wasn't just his loyalty that forced him to not let harm come to Nico Robin. It had been many, many years since he had last felt that pull in his chest, that desire and that overwhelming instinct to protect. No, not since Kuina passed away had that feeling crossed his mind. And it felt good. I wasn't planning on killing you, but... She raised her hands in her traditional cross over her chest, preparing for a counterattack, but only too late did it cross her mind that she had no time to bloom her limbs and deflect his massive ice saber. But she wouldn't go down without a fight. She closed her eyes, half to concentrate, and the rest not to see the blow that would befall her. She waited. Instead of intense pain, she only heard the sound of metal clashing against frozen ice, and there was really only one person who used steel. She opened her eyes, finding the swordsman standing before her, one of his katana blocking the admiral's strike. The green-haired man stared up at the Marine. His back was to her, so she couldn't see the expression in his eyes, but she could tell by the tension in his shoulder blades he was livid. His lead was followed soon by Cook-san, who quickly disarmed the Marine with a cry of, straight shoot. Yosh, Nagahana-kun cried triumphantly. Don't hog all the good shots, you shitty cook, Kenshi-san growled at Cook-san above him. You're one to talk, you natural treasure. The blonde returned. Treasure, indeed. Sencho-san delivered a mighty punch to the stomach. She knew it wouldn't work. His ice power was too strong. She had witnessed it firsthand, freezing Saul right in front of her. The vision of her giant friend slowly transforming into an ice statue still haunted her at night. She watched in horror as the cook's knee, captain's hand, and swordsman's shoulder were all frozen solid. He hit all three of them at once. Miss Navigator's voice shook with fear and worry for her nakama. Nagahana-kun and Dr. San all screamed in fright as the swordsman, captain and cook writhed on the ground at Aokiji's feet, clutching at their frozen body parts, obviously in pain. I have to treat them, Dr. San whispered. If they get frostbite, their appendages will start to rot. He whipped around to face the cowering sharpshooter. What are you doing, Usopp? Go and help them. I want to, Nagahana-kun responded, his voice shaking. They need help. But for some reason, my legs aren't working. You're too scared to move. Luffy, Sanji, Zoro. It was all her fault. She only wanted to sink to the ground, curl up in a ball and simply die, to lay in that one spot for all eternity. She knew from the start her past would come back to haunt her, and at the time when she joined the crew, she didn't think much of it. Only now, after their grand adventures in the Sky Islands and Davy Back fight and all the other did she finally realize that these people were not like the others. Sure, they didn't know any more about her past than she did theirs, but she still felt this deep connection to all of them. And now, because of her slip-up, they would all be killed. It was her own fault. Robin, run. She heard Miss Navigator somewhere to her left. She couldn't move. Her fear and self-pain had rooted her to the spot, rendering her completely helpless. You have some loyal nakama, Aokiji commented. But you will never change, Nico Robin. No, she protested, pouring as much truth into her words as she could muster. I'm not. The image came back to her again as the Admiral embraced her. Robin, watch out. Get away from him. Robin-chan. She could feel her joints seizing up, her blood turning solid in her veins. Her body temperature dropped dangerously low. This was what he must have felt, 20 years ago on the now non-existent island of Ohara. The pain was terrifying. Her brain shut down as the cold slowly overcame her, and she knew no more. Wait. Luffy froze, his arms still stretched out in preparation to launch himself toward her. He looked up above to where she stood on the balcony, her hands clamped behind her back with sea prism stone. She forced herself to meet his gaze as best she could, the anger and sadness welling up inside her. I've told you countless times, she said. I won't come back to you anymore. Go back. I don't even want to see your faces anymore. She internally cringed at the last sentence because she knew it was a downright lie. Still, she continued on. Why did you come to rescue me? Images of the Straw Hat Pirates filled her mind, each of them fighting their way up to her as she spoke. She imagined Kenshi-san whirling his blades in that elegant dance of his that she admired. Cook-san lit a fresh cigarette as he walked among the men he had just kicked down. Miss Navigator and Dr. San teamed up to vanquish their common foe, and all for what? It was a horrible, horrible fate they were submitting themselves to. Why couldn't they see that? When did I ask you to save me? She yelled, her voice rising in tone and volume as her anger increased. Her emotions were roiling now as she vented her frustrations. Slowly, Sencho-san's fingers uncurled from their grip and his rubber arms snapped back into place. He was watching her incredulously, like he couldn't believe she was the same woman he had on his crew. Looking at that expression made her heart bleed, but she forced herself to go on. I only want to die. As much as she loved being with the Straw Hats, she had spoken the truth. She didn't need saving, she only wanted to die. That was her destiny. She was the devil's child, shunned all her life only for being a survivor of the infamous island, the inhabitants of which tried to research the forbidden history. It was a painful 20 years, hunted by the government, finding no place to live for fear of betrayal, scavenging for food. You know Robin, Luffy said, flicking away the booger he had just excavated from his nostril. We already came this far. As he spoke, the ceiling behind him erupted, and screams could be heard among the whirling wind. The stones broke, spread away from the three figures barely visible in the vortex. Finally the wind dissipated, and her eyes widened as the orange-haired navigator and burly doctor were revealed, the third person being an agent of justice, who was tossed to the other side of the building and disappeared. Miss Navigator landed safely, her arms to either side for balance. Meanwhile, Mr. Doctor crashed behind her with a moan. Anyway, we're going to save you, Luffy continued like the goings-on behind him were normal, which, now that she thought about it, actually were. And then, if you still want to die, you can do that after we've saved you. Kenshi-san pulled himself up from the hole his crewmates had just flown from. Never in her dreams did she imagine that he would come as well. Didn't he despise her? True, he did save her in Skypia, but that wasn't premeditated. Did this mean he finally accepted her? Miss Navigator comically rounded on him, blaming him for the whirlwind they had nearly perished from. A yell was followed by another explosion as Cook-san forced his way to the top, immediately picking a fight with his green-haired adversary. Immediately following was Nagahana-kun, flying up from behind the building. How in the world he managed that, she would never know. One by one, they appeared, one by one to save her. Pirates, so many of them. Spandam panicked, his eyes larger than golf balls. She watched in stunned silence. Her eyes met Kenshi-san's, who was looking up at her as he walked to help Cook-san and Dr. San pull Nagahana-kun from the ground where he had landed. It was impossible to tell what he was thinking from the distance between them, but the fact that he was here at all was enough for her. "I'll request this from you, Robin," Luffy yelled up to her. "Whether you want to die or not, I don't care about whatever you say. Say that kind of thing while you're by our sides." She inhaled sharply at his words. No one had ever said something like that to her. "That's right, Robin Kwan." Cook-san agreed, fist pumping the air. "Robin, come back," the doctor yelled. She could feel the tears welling up behind her eyes as they all stared up at her. Nakama, friends, those who will protect her. They would stay with her, through all the hardships. They would protect her with their very lives. They didn't care of her past. They didn't care who she was, what the world government labeled her as. To them, she was who she was, and they didn't care about anything else. She blinked the tears away. "Leave the rest to us." Luffy, Zoro, Sanji, we're in big trouble, Sanji yelled. "Your grandpa came back, Luffy." He yelled as well. "He's at the opposite coast making arrangements to attack and is looking for us." Luffy was stunned. "Why? Didn't he decide not to capture us? How should we know?" Sanji responded as he and the swordsman reached the ship. "Hurry up and prepare to leave." He paused briefly as the sprinting pirates passed the blue-haired shipwright where he sat among the ruins of forgotten ships. "Frankie, you bastard, you're still not wearing your pants." Luffy seemed to come to a decision, a smile on his lips. He stood on the railing and threw the speedos down toward their owner with a cry of, "Here you go." They landed in his wide fingers as the brunette looked up at the Straw Hat Captain, his eyebrows raised in confusion. "Well then, get on, Frankie," Luffy insisted, crossing his arms confidently. "On my ship." "Hey," the retro man chuckled, lowering his triangular sunglasses over his eyes. "Stop talking so cocky. The only repairs you amateurs are capable of are cheap ones. If there isn't a shipwright on this splendid ship, I would pity the ship. It can't be helped. I'll give you a hand. Your ship's shipwright will be the great Frankie." The swordsman smiled, glad the blue-haired man had finally come to his senses and followed the dream he had carried since childhood. "All right, a new nakama," Luffy yelled triumphantly. Swinging his yellow duffel over his shoulder, the newest addition to the Straw Hat Pirates took the first step toward achieving his dream. Frankie. He came to in a small space, dark and stuffy. His arms were bound to his body by some sort of sticky filament. He could still feel his katana by his side, which was of some comfort, but in this small space with his arms bound, there was little he could do for himself. "Hey," he yelled, "let me out of here. Isn't there anybody? Answer me, damn it." He writhed in his restraints, barely enough room to move. It was pitch dark, couldn't see anything. There was always a possibility of oxygen depletion if he remained like this for too long. He figured if he at least kept talking, someone would hear him eventually. "Where the hell am I?" He wondered aloud. "I can't see anything." Almost immediately, he heard heavy footsteps from somewhere outside his prison, approaching. That was almost too fast, he thought, his guard immediately doubling. There was a pause, and the lid to whatever he was contained it was suddenly lifted. The bright light blinded him for a moment, but soon his eyes adjusted to see the circle of coffins around the room, blocked by the enormous silhouette of a large boned man, his face obscured by shadows. "What do you want?" he demanded. The larger didn't reply, merely reaching down and wrapping his hand around him and pulled him from the coffin in which he had been imprisoned. "Let go of me. What are you doing?" The giant secured a white string to his bound body, suspending the swordsman from the ceiling. "You bastard. Who are you?" When he received no answer, he grew even more irritated. "Answer me." Someone turned on a light, casting his shadow far across the floor. "What's with this light?" He demanded answers from the larger man, whose lower body was now visible thanks to the illumination. "Oi, what's the meaning of this?" He struggled against the white substance wrapped around him. What occurred next rendered him speechless, only his mouth hanging open in complete shock, eyes bugging from his head. The flash of steel scissors in the spotlight, a horrible snapping sound and the sensation of falling, his body crumpling against something or someone else before his vision went dark and he knew nothing. Fine, I'll let you have one head. He sat, slamming his hands on the destroyed remnants of the castle. "However, in exchange, please take my life for his. I ask this of you." Surprise was evident on the Shichibukai's features. "My head may not be worth much at the moment, but this is the head of the man who will become the greatest swordsman in the world. Surely that should be enough." "Despite your great ambition," the bear man stated monotonically, "you wish to take that man's place and approach death. Aside from that, I see no other way to save the crew. If you can't even protect your captain, then your ambition is worthless. Luffy is the man who will become the pirate king." The bear man took his time digesting his declaration. It was impossible to decipher what he was thinking, but he was too caught up in his state of furious confidence to worry about it. As long as he agreed. Please. The pain wreaking havoc on his body was plentiful, and to be free from that would be nice, but it was more than physical pain. His journey would end here either way. "Now just hold on a minute, you damn bastard." He straightened, eyes wide as the new voice entered the conversation. He looked to where the owner of the voice was stumbling towards him, his black suit in complete ruin. The cook didn't look too bad, he must have fallen behind a rock to shield him from the worst of the explosion. How are you supposed to get ahead if you're dead? What about your ambition, idiot? You. Hey, big guy. The blonde cook stepped between the Shichibukai and swordsman, hands tucked deep into his pockets. Rather than this moss-headed swordsman, take my life instead. Sanji's breathing became labored, and he shook with every word. I know that the Navy may not consider me a threat as of yet, but soon enough, the one from this crew who will cause the most trouble is me, Blackleg Sanji. Why, you? The bear man seemed at a loss with the two men in front of him, willingly putting their lives before him, at his mercy. He said nothing for a long time, merely watching the blonde and Marimo. Come on, do it. Sanji murmured through his heavy breath. Instead of this guy, my life. Take it. When Kuma didn't respond, he continued. We're both resigned to the sacrifices we must make. Let this flower of death blossom once and for all. Without turning, he directed his words to the green-haired teen behind him. Oi, tell everyone to take care. Sorry, but it looks like you'll need to find yourselves another cook. He would have none of it. He stood silently, and in one fluid stroke, rammed Shisui's hilt into the cook's side, hitting the pressure point. Sanji immediately whipped around, gripping him at the shoulder. The hazy look in his eyes told him that the cook was livid but also scared. He knew exactly what was going to happen if he lost it. You, bastard. His body hit the ground with a thump as he lost consciousness. Kuma looked on silently as he silently pulled his katana from the straps in his harakmiki. This is my final request, he said, and tossed the swords on the rock at the bear man's feet. His heart wrenched, watching Kuina's prized sword clatter like that against the stone. Kuma heaved a sigh. If I were to lay my hand on Straw Hat after this, my honor would be at stake. I'm in your debt. Kuma turned toward where Luffy lay spread-eagled where he had fallen, a peaceful expression on his face. The bear man knelt, grasping the front of the rubberman's orange vest. I promise I won't harm him. He lifted Luffy into the air, handling his fragile body with care. But before I claim your sacrifice, I will make you experience hell. Gently, he placed his pawed hand against his chest. The body convulsed before a red substance was excreted from his captain's skin. He watched with wide eyes as the red smoky material hovered in the air in the shape of a giant paw print. What I have just repelled from his body was his suffering, his stress. This is all the damage he accumulated during his battles with Moria and Oz. If you truly wish to take his place, then must experience the same pain. With the additional damage you've taken, I doubt you'll survive. Please, try some. Kuma repelled a small bubble of the red pain towards him. He watched it draw closer. It couldn't be that bad. A small bubble of pain couldn't do that much compared to the much larger source. Right, wrong. His insides exploded and sewed themselves back together with poison thread. His heart beat madly, the blood pounding in his ears. Nails were driven into his skull as all his nerves became receptors of lava. A horrifying scream he had no idea he could make ripped itself from his throat. He crumpled to the ground, heaving massive amounts of air into his aching lungs. A new respect for his captain rose within him, to keep going even after receiving so much damage. How was it? He clenched his shaking fists. Just let me choose the place. XXX. I broke away from her, breathing hard. My eyes felt as huge as golf balls as I suddenly realized why I was down here, what had happened to cause it and what I was doing with my crewmate. And why I was doing it. Holy shit, I whispered, watching the glow finally reach the tips of my feet. Instantly, a pounding rang in my head, like someone was hammering away at the inside of my skull. It spread to my chest, and I let out a yell as my heart was jump-started, pounding at my ribcage like a charging bull. Zoro. Robin ran her hands down my arms and across my shoulders, massaging the muscles, which didn't help much. Her expression was frantic. She had no idea what was going on, or what to do about it. What's happening? Give me a second. I managed to get out, curling into a tight ball. It'll pass, I think. A second was a bit under-exaggerated. It was more like 5 minutes until the pain finally subsided, leaving me hunched over in the water sweating buckets, my chest heaving and my heart pounding. The glow had vanished from my skin, and when I checked, no integers ticked on my forearm. I slowly sat up, facing the raven-haired woman before me. Okay, I think it's UPGH. Robin tackled me in a huge hug, her arms wrapped tightly around my torso, her head nestled into my chest. I immediately returned the hug, pulling her closer to me. The familiar smell of her hair still lingered, and I inhaled it lustfully. I knew she could hear my heartbeat pounding beneath the skin, and a smile pulled at her lips. Robin, I whispered into her ear. Thank you. I was so scared, she whispered back. So scared that it wouldn't work, that it all would have been for nothing. I snorted. Death won't take me that easily. She pulled away, but kept herself tightly encompassed in my embrace. You do know what this means, don't you? What means? She sighed. Do I need to spell it out for you? Why we're down here, the entire reason you're alive again. I know why. She blinked, surprise evident in those captivating eyes. You do. I nodded. I was a spirit for a while, kind of floating around the ship for a long time watching everything. So I know about the legend, the place we're in and the conditions. A light flush swept across her cheeks. So I've finally understood at this very moment why I can't seem to stop looking at you, I admitted, averting my eyes and taking a sudden interest in a little crack in the stone cave. This was going to be a hell of a lot harder than I imagined. She knew exactly what I was going to say, but she just wanted to hear it directly from my mouth, and that was just cruel. But that's one of the traits I liked about the archaeologist. Why I have this overwhelming urge to protect you, and a lot of other stuff. My words were rushed now. And the reason is because Shish, she interrupted, holding a finger against my lips. I want to say it first. She heaved a breath. Roronoa Zoro, I love you. We spoke simultaneously, our words in perfect sync. Each was met with the embarrassed smile, completely ignoring the "ew" from Adonis somewhere in the dark. She moved closer, embracing me once again. We sat there for however long we did, simply enjoying the other's company. Robin, I finally said, breaking the silence. Since when? Aokiji, she responded. I don't know, I admitted. But a while. I questioned myself a bit after Skypia, but most of it was just suspicion, and I didn't want to admit it to myself either. I wanted to focus on my training, but it always somehow came up in my thoughts and Zoro. Robin. Stop talking. Chapter 16 Friendship that transcends time. When do you think people die? When they are shot through the heart by the bullet of a pistol. No. When they're ravaged by an incurable disease. No. When they drink a soup made from a poisonous mushroom. No. It's when they're forgotten. Dr. Harulik. Chopper Paw. Let me out. Get me out of here, damn it. Luffy, calm down. Someone will hear us. Reindeer Gorilla is right, Straw Hat. Chill out. You bastards should know you can't imprison the great Captain Usopp. My army of 8,000 men have already surrounded us with a fleet of 100 ships and will be attacking any second now. Really? Of course, young Chopper. He's lying. How could you say such a thing? Ooh-ah-ah. Can he be any louder? A rat squeaked by my hoof. I can still hear myself think. I know what you mean, I muttered. He's going to open his wounds again. There was no one to hear him if he continued yelling anyway. The Marines had left us in a secluded cell made of sea prism stone, a substance everyone had already tried their best to break. It nullified my zone ability and Luffy's rubber power, and seemed impervious even to Usopp's special kick that had defeated a Sea King. The only choice we had left was to wait for everyone's return. And hope Zoro would be with them. Frankie voiced my thoughts. Yo, Mugiwara, we just have to wait it out. Says the guy who got us into this mess, Usopp muttered. Oi, I didn't see Frankie-san do anything wrong, Brook intervened. Though I don't have eyes to see with, yo-ho-ho. Shut it, stupid skeleton. Brook is right, I finally managed to get in, standing and facing my nakama determinedly. We're all sore from fighting non-stop, and with added tension, your body will be in no fighting shape at all when they finally do come for us. So doctor's orders, don't exert yourself. Bastards, Luffy growled one more time through the bars and finally resigned himself, sitting on the floor as he fingered a button on his ruined vest. It still remained a mystery to me how in the world Luffy was conscious when he should still be out cold. He received 10 times the amount of damage we did combined, and yet Zoro, the second most powerful member of our crew, was the one who lost his life. What on earth happened? I pulled my pink hat over my eyes, a habit when I was deep in thought. These curiosities racking my mind since the Marines had finally overwhelmed us. When Luffy had been taken down by a sea prism stone bolus, the rest of us slowly succumbed to exertion and generally being outnumbered. If our other 3 powerhouses had been there, namely Robin, Sanji and Zoro, we would have no problem fighting them off. But our morale was low, our bodies battered, and our energy virtually non-existent. I had faith that Nami, Robin, and Sanji would succeed. But how they would find us in this marine warship, locked in the brig on our way to a prison, I had not the faintest clue. I don't want to go to prison. We sat in silence for a long time. Day turned to night, and night into day. I slept very little, and the amount I did get was restless. When the sun finally began to lighten the musky cell, my joints ached and protested when I moved. I could tell the others felt the same way. No one came to deliver a breakfast, and my stomach rumbled, eager for Sanji's excellent cooking. We spoke very little, save for Luffy constantly yelling and attacking the bars to the cell, moaning and drifting to the floor every time he came into contact with the sea prism stone. Even I thought it was kind of pathetic. I estimated the time around 10 o'clock in the morning when there was a sudden pounding of feet above our heads. The Marines were agitated about something, and running to regroup. Maybe a Sea King had appeared. Or maybe we had arrived at our destination, even after so short a travel period. The sounds of gunfire peppered the air with the yells of wounded men and clash of steel on steel, quickly eliminating the latter possibility. Looks like they ran into more pirates, Frankie observed. I looked up through a crack in the ceiling, where we could barely see the boots of the humans running above us, making the stream of light flicker nauseatingly. Something pinkish fluttered through the crack. Everyone's eyes followed the papery object as it drifted through the air, coming to rest on the tip of my blue nose before dissipating into nothing, leaving behind the faint smell of lilacs. I exchanged excited looks with Usopp. I bet I know why the Marines are agitated. The sharpshooter grinned. They're back, Frankie confirmed. Super timing. Brook rained on our parade. But what if Zoro-san is not with them? Tears began to well up behind my eyes. If we failed, I wouldn't live with myself. If I had just administered first aid sooner, this might not have happened. Usopp wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Oi, Brook, he chided. There's no way subordinates would fail. Luffy suddenly heaved a deep breath. Ooh-ee, he yelled in that loud voice of his. We're down here. Robin, Nami, Sanji, Zoro. We waited, hearts pounding. The yells didn't cease for a long time, explosions rocking the ship. After all, 4 warships were escorting the infamous Straw Hat Pirates. Finally, an explosion occurred right next to us, several Marines falling through the hole in the ceiling just outside the bars to our cell. Falling down after them was a familiar lanky figure dressed in a strange getup of what looked like a bedsheet wrapped around his hips and golden bands around his biceps, a cigarette dangling from his lips. S-A-A-A-A-A-A-N-N-N-N-N-J-J-I-I-I-I-I-I-I. Usopp and I sobbed, though through my tears I wondered why on earth our chef was wearing such a strange outfit. Super nice entrance, curly cook, Frankie praised. And that sheet is totally a man's romance. Oi, Sanji, Luffy ordered as the blonde chef stood and approached them. Open this cage right now so I can kick their asses. Sanji complied, producing keys from his sheet. He still had not spoken, which shook me to the core. What did the expression of defeat on his face mean? Was Brook's comment correct after all? Did they really fail? Luffy was the first one out the door, eyes blazing. U-U-U-U-U-U-A-A-A-A-G-H. I'll teach those guys what happens when you lock me up. Wait, Luffy. Usopp tried to stop him, but the rubberman was already launching himself through the hole Sanji had created. Shouts of surprised Marines and, it's Straw Hat Luffy, immediately followed. Geez, so how'd it go, Curly Cook? Frankie asked. Is Zoro bro gonna make it? Sanji exchanged glances with the shipwright, his one visible eye cloaked in dull emotion. But I detected a pull in his lips, so subtle I thought I must have imagined it. A feminine grunt met our ears as a body hit the deck. Sanji immediately went into protect female mode, leaping after Luffy with a heroic cry of, Nami Swan. Your knight in shining armor is coming to rescue you. What are we waiting for? Frankie grinned, removing the skin sheet over his fist to reveal the brass knuckles beneath. It still amazed me how well the metal had been integrated into his body. Let's kick Marine ass. We didn't need telling twice. With a yell we jumped from the galley and into the fray above. Usopp and I were immediately surrounded by about 8 Marines, their guns trained on us. I grew to heavy point, standing back to back with the sniper, who had prepared one of his attacks. I could detect Luffy's faint scent of stretched rubber with that tang of meat somewhere on another ship, but gunpowder prevented me from determining his exact location. Sanji's smoky scent was mixed with a trace of citrus, so Nami must be nearby as well. But the smell of fresh coffee, and the steely aroma I had come to admire were not among the many scents floating in the air, which puzzled me. Hadn't one of Robin's Hana petals rested on my nose? You straw hats won't escape that easily. One of the brave Marines stammered. Don't think you can win. We'll see about that, Usopp yelled, cocking his slingshot. I raised a clenched fist, pressure building up behind my eyes, but I refused to cry. I remembered what Zoro had told me back in the Davy Back fight, oh so long ago. When you set out to sea, it was your own decision and now you have to live with the consequences. Not one pirate worth his salt is gonna sympathize with those tears. A man would quietly suck it up and watch the rest of this game. Those words had stayed with me since, and had ultimately become my motto. My special words. My fingernails dug into palms as I prepared my attack. If Zoro wasn't here to fight anymore, then I would become stronger and fight his part, too. Heavy. Santoryu. Gong. Tatsumaki. The Marines I punched fell back into the winding tornado of razor-sharp winds, screaming in pain. The doctor side of me was repelled as I stared in stunned silence, Usopp just as speechless. The wind slowly died away, disturbed particles in the atmosphere settling down. It took a while for my brain to process what had just happened, and by the time it did, I could faintly make out 2 silhouettes through the dust, one male and one female. A sea breeze blew through my hair and across my nose, bringing with it the scent of salt, fish, flowers, sweat and steel. Scents I recognized immediately. What's up, Chopper? Usopp poked my side, trying to get my attention. It's them, I managed, eyes fixed on the approaching figures. Usopp followed my gaze, rendered the same as me as the dust finally settled. Black hair, slender legs, blue eyes, arms crossed across the human female breast. Broad shoulders, muscular arms, scarred skin, thick neck, charcoal eyes, shock of green hair. Oh, Chopper, I thought that was you, said a deep voice. Nice punch, Zoro. I let all the tears out now, shrinking into brain point and charging toward him full speed. He grunted as the force of my impact on his face forced him back, sitting down hard on the deck while Robin just laughed. The hilts of swords in his hand fell as he did, clanging against the deck. He must have scavenged some from Marines, seeing as how his were still in the crow's nest where Robin had left them during that cyclone. Usopp joined in the hug, his nose running. "Zoro, we missed you so much. I'm so glad you're okay." He sobbed. "Oi, guys," Zoro mumbled through my fur coat. His warm breath against my skin was enough to convince me I wasn't dreaming. "Can't breathe." We disentangled ourselves from our returned first mate. He was dressed almost the same way I had last seen him, but his clothes were clean and crisp, even if slowly dirtying from the gunpowder in the air, in addition to some bleeding wounds on his forearm. Robin was looking very nice in her sheet similar to Sanji's, and if I were attracted to human females, I'd say she was very pretty. The sounds of battle continued to rage around us. Sanji suddenly appeared momentarily, smirked in our direction, and disappeared again. That got me thinking. We would have been here earlier, except Robin had to do something. "Read a point glop," Zoro replied when asked why they took so long to arrive. "A poneglyph, Zoro," Robin corrected. "And it was very important to achieving my dream. It took a lot of convincing to make the Valkyrie show it to me. They're just lucky I read poneglyphs and they don't." "Yeah, I don't really get that history stuff." "Sorry to interrupt," Usopp interjected. "So what happened to you guys? What did you have to do?" Zoro turned a shade of red I'd never seen on him before. "What did it mean?" "Perhaps when the crew is completely reunited," Robin piped up. "It's a very long story we should only tell once. This encouraged me to fight my hardest, so as to complete the battle faster." I could smell Zoro little ways off, keeping a relatively low profile. I suspected it was Robin's influence on him. Normally he would have defeated everyone by now. Finally, all the Marine were defeated, and all the Straw Hat Pirates, minus Robin and Zoro, had reboarded the Sunny, which had been towed behind us. Frankie was overjoyed at seeing his beloved ship, thanking any deity he could think of that she had not been sunk. Luffy immediately rounded on Nami and Sanji. "Oi, where are Robin and Zoro?" Nami had gotten a makeover, too, and also dressed in a sheet. Did the people of Myth Island really dress so scantily? Granted, Nami dressed scantily almost every day, so I shouldn't have been surprised, but still. They exchanged glances. I didn't know why they didn't just reveal the good news. Sanji obviously knew Zoro had returned, and if he did, then Nami would know also, that their Nakama were alive and well. And missing. Usopp appeared to be just as confused. There, Nami began, and Luffy's eyes displayed slight horror as denial of what Nami was going to say built up inside him. At that moment, the door to the kitchen opened, and Robin appeared in the frame, a biscuit in her hand. We all watched her in stunned silence, confused as to why she had been hiding in the galley. She smiled that mysterious smile of hers and stepped onto the grassy lawn where we had converged, and I once again caught a whiff of steel. Behind the archaeologist came a tall green-haired man chugging a bottle of sake. Eye contact was briefly made before Zoro suddenly found himself surrounded by 8 excited, overjoyed, and sobbing crewmates, Robin smiling and Nami and Sanji getting misty-eyed, though the cook looked about ready to shoot himself because of it. I inhaled that smell of his, determined not to let it disappear again. "What happened? Tell us everything. I'm so glad you're alive. Does this mean, damn it, get off of me?" The clamor died down, and we settled into a semicircle, surrounding the 4 who went off on their own to bring back the swordsman. The midday sun beat down on our heads, and Sanji provided drinks. Then the archaeologist, cartographer and chef traded off telling their individual stories until it was just the females, because Sanji fainted at the mention of the Valkyrie. It was at that point in the story when I realized why Nami, Robin and Sanji were in bedsheets. Then Nami dropped off as well, and soon it was only Robin relaying the events, because Nami had been left behind. I could tell by her body language she left some stuff out. The blood was rising in her cheeks, and her fingers played with the grass, the hand extremely close to where Zoro reclined still chugging his alcohol. I was too interested in the story to pay much attention to the drinking. When she came to the cavern and river, Zoro finally interrupted. "How does it matter?" he said hurriedly. "Everything's back to normal. Oi, Arrow Cook, get me some more sake." "Of course it matters," Nami berated. "I want to hear it from you guys' mouth. You kissed, didn't you?" "Yes," said Robin. "No," said Zoro, though his face betrayed him. "Congratulations." Frankie pat Zoro roughly on the back. A little too ruly, because the swordsman suddenly convulsed, coughing up blood on the grass. Chaos erupted. "Zoro, drink more sake, it'll help." "No it won't, you moron." "AAAAAH. We need a doctor." "That's you." "Oh, right." With help from Frankie and Brooke, a sedated Zoro was carted off into the infirmary. Putting a stethoscope to his chest, I detected rising blood pressure, and upon further investigation, diagnosed fractured bones, ripped organs, and a punctured lung. I would need to perform surgery, and fast. I reached for a needle in slight panic. If I didn't operate immediately, Zoro would die. Again, and then it really would be my fault. "Here," said a gentle voice, and I looked over as Robin pressed the instrument into my hoof. Her eyes were worried, but also confident. We're counting on you, Dr. Chopper. That's silly. I giggled. Complimenting me doesn't make me happy, you bastard. Do your best, she said. Would you mind if I stayed here and assisted? I glanced toward my patient, whose breathing had become labored. Blood flowed freely from reopened wounds not fully healed from thriller bark, and additional wounds taken from the trip. Yes, I said, and Robin smiled. Oh Zero, we're going to have a giant party. Luffy declared that night. Zoro's surgery had been successful, and was currently out cold in the sick bay, doped up on anesthetic and painkillers. Robin refused to leave his side, quietly accepting the food and drink brought to her. Shall I be in charge of the music compilations, then? Brook suggested, whipping out his violin with a flourish. Sanji, food. Yeah, give me a while to prepare it. Who cares, we'll eat it raw. Like hell. Super. An hour later, the Straw Hat crew, including Robin though she kept an eye, literally, on the sick bay, were converged in the kitchen, singing, laughing, dancing and getting drunk. Brook had us on the third round of Bink's sake, while Frankie and Usopp were performing an awesome tabletop disco dance. I joined in with my chopstick nose performance, Luffy laughing merrily. Even if it was only the 8 of us, there was enough noise to awaken the dead. How is Zoro's condition? Nami asked me during a brief moment of clarity. I'd never seen Zoro take on so much damage before, I admitted, nibbling on a piece of cake. I'm sure something happened when we were knocked out. But he's stabilized for now, and should be fine in a couple of weeks. As long as he keeps his bandages on and takes his medicine, I added as an afterthought. Robin looked distant through the majority of the celebration, like she couldn't get the swordsman's condition from her mind. I didn't know how the human female brain functioned when it came to emotional things like love, but I could tell she really needed a distraction. Hey, Robin, I said, approaching my fellow bookworm. She looked down where I had tugged on the hem of her long pants, a forced smile on her face. What's on your mind? She asked, patting the seat next to her on the futon, and I joined her there. I just noticed you looked really sad, I admitted. She shook her head. Not sad. Just thinking. What happened in the cavern in the River Chai? Zoro and I shared something not many can, and I know more about him than I ever thought I could have. It explains so much, and yet leaves still so many more unsolved mysteries. I worry about him sometimes, but I suppose I'm just reaping what I sowed. Zoro's going to be fine, I assured her, gesturing toward the center of the room. The table had been pushed to the side to make way for the dance floor, which Frankie was currently burning up with his super dance. Have some fun, okay. She blinked at me, a bit surprised, and then smiled brightly again, transforming into the bright human female I admired. I think you're right. Let's have some fun. Chapter 17 Epilogue. Until we meet again. Before the heart of truth. There is no need for words. Nico Robin. Robin Pa. Something exploded. Dust and debris billowed outward, masking the source, but at that moment, whatever caused it was put out of my mind. A scream overlapped the huge noise, followed by the early inaudible sound of a body collapsing. At first I didn't think much of it. Old habits were kicking in, to just leave them to take care of themselves. When faced with a threat like a pacifista, it was all you could do to save your own skin. I continued to run until I heard Usopp's voice over the din. Zoro. Zoro was hit by a beam. Zoro-san. I stopped short, the words freezing in my heart. The dust cleared, and a tall man in a yellow suit and Marine Admiral cloak appeared from the depths. Kizaru. I whispered in fear. He stood over where Zoro lay shaking in the grass, blood staining the back of his red and white shirt. Red droplets stained the green stalks by his mouth, chest heaving. I could only watch as the Admiral's devil fruit began to kick in, his foot shining brightly as it was raised directly above Zoro's huddled form. He hadn't fully recovered from our ordeal in Valhalla and Myth Island, and it was showing at the worst possible time. There was no way he could defend himself in his condition. Zoro. Luffy screamed. He can fire a laser. Frankie exclaimed. This is bad. If Zoro bro gets hit at such a close range, he'll die. Zoro's in trouble. The look on our captain's face was horrifying. Such a look of pain I'd never witnessed before. The thought of losing his first mate and best friend for the second time, so soon after Thriller Bark in Myth Island, ripped him to shreds. Usopp. The yell jerked the sniper, who was closest to Zoro, into motion. You, stop it. He threatened weakly, aiming his kabuto at the Admiral, who continued to stand there casually, as if silently torturing us. The long-nosed teen fired a shot straight toward his forehead, but the lead ball passed clean through Kizaru's face. Stunned, Usopp tried again, and again, but each attack ended the same as the first. Damn it. Why? I can't hit him. Brook ran forward now, thrusting his sword through Kizaru's chest, only to find no blood spurted from the strike. I can't stab him, either. What do we do? Kizaru took the following attacks without so much as a bat of the eye, not even registering Usopp and Brook's requests for him to move and leave Zoro alone. Finally, he appeared to decide to reveal the source of his inability to be shot or stabbed. It's no use, he drawled. I ate the Pika Pika no mi. I'm a light man. Logia type. A light man. Frankie echoed. You're kidding, right? Nami trembled. Zoro's gonna die. Zoro. Run. Chopper screamed, tears streaming from his eyes. Zoro. I could only watch in stunned silence. My limbs were frozen, and wouldn't move when I tried. Was it fear or anger rooting me to the spot? Whatever the reason, I couldn't do anything to help the hapless swordsman. Zoro slowly shifted, murmuring into the grass, voice laced with pain. My body won't move. No use. Sanji translated. That guy is at his limit already. I finally managed to regain control of my own limbs at the thought of losing Zoro permanently this time. If we couldn't move the admiral, then we'd move Zoro. I crossed my arms over my chest. Vinte fleur. Arms bloomed from the ground next to his immobile body, the texture of the fabric pressing into my palms as I latched onto the back of his shirt and began to roll him out from under Kizaru's foot. I didn't bother to grab the discarded sword he had borrowed from somewhere. What mattered was his life. His eyes found me as he rolled over, and I detected an unspoken thank you. All right, Usopp cheered. Great, Robin. Kizaru, however, had other plans. He transformed into light and reformed directly over the path I was rolling. It was too close to change course, and I could only watch as the user's foot slammed into Zoro's back, pinning him to the grass. I pulled harder at his shirt, but a part of me knew it was futile. He just got over there in an instant. Usopp stammered. I won't let you get away, Kizaru stated slowly. It's useless. You die now. Silence swept across the archipelago as every Straw Hat pirate silently screamed Zoro's name, each person terrified at the thought of losing Zoro once again. But none were more terrified or saddened than I. A figure sped across the ground, faster than my eyes could follow. He slammed into Kizaru, redirecting the laser beam of light into a giant tree, the explosion shaking the very ground beneath our feet. Zoro groaned as Kizaru stepped off him. So now you decide to show yourself, Dark King Rayleigh. My eyes widened. Sure enough, the Pirate King Galdi. Roger's first mate stood opposite the Marine Admiral, having just saved Zoro's life. I won't let you take out these youngsters, Rayleigh said matter-of-factly. Their era is just beginning. Pops, Luffy yelled, fear still present in his voice. He saved him, Frankie observed as some of the crew collapsed in exhaustion. I couldn't help but smile in relief, but this relief was short-lived. Usopp, Brook, Luffy yelled from across the archipelago. Take Zoro and run. Right. Usopp gathered Zoro into his arms and ran, the skeletal musician right behind him. Everyone, think only of how to escape. Luffy ordered. Right now, we can't beat these guys. I never thought I would hear those words from our captain's mouth, a captain who never ran from a fight, a captain who would loudly declare he would kick any and everyone's ass for so much as insulting one of his nakama. Everyone split up into groups of 3. Nami, Frankie and Sanji took off together while Chopper, Luffy and I fled the scene. Usopp, Brook and Zoro had already disappeared somewhere inside the mass of trees. Meanwhile, Rayleigh and Kizaru had begun a dramatic sword battle, explosions causing the very island to rumble in protest. 2 explosions that didn't originate from their battle, however, drew our attention to the space behind a massive root in the direction Usopp, Brook and Zoro had fled. No doubt a beam from a pacifista. But there was no way to tell what had happened, and Luffy immediately veered in their direction, Chopper and I close behind. They're in trouble over there, Luffy panted, but an attack from Sentomaru drew his attention. Luffy, Chopper yelled as the captain was sent flying back into a building. How can he hurt a rubberman? Chopper, don't stop, I reminded him breathlessly. Saanji. We whipped around just in time to see the cook take a direct hit from a pacifista. Not a moment later, another beam directed at Usopp forced the sniper to accidentally drop Zoro's limp body to the ground, which suddenly spasmed as Zoro grunted in discomfort. That appeared to be the last straw for Chopper, who grew to heavy point, simultaneously popping 3 rumble balls into his mouth. The doctor instantly transformed into a massive beast 20 times his normal size, roaring like an ancient dinosaur. I had heard of this, I whispered, recalling stories I had been told during the storming of Eni's lobby. It was more terrifying and powerful than I had dared to imagine. I rushed to where Luffy remained in the rubble of the collapsed building, managing to pull him to safety just before a boulder flattened us. Another one showed up. Usopp's voice screamed. True to his word, another Kuma had appeared, but this one seemed different. It appeared to be having a conversation with Zoro, who had somehow managed to lurch to his feet, his entire body shaking uncontrollably. As the bear man made to remove the glove from his hand, I became instantly convinced this was the real Shichibukai Bartholomew Kuma. If you were to go on vacation, where would you like to go? Zoro tensed. Oi, Zoro, Usopp whispered, reaching out toward the swordsman. If you don't run. Kuma raised his hand. Zoro's head turned, somehow knowing which direction I was standing. Our eyes connected for the briefest of moments. His mouth moved, trying to form words, but before he could finish, the warlord's hand descended. I blinked. Zoro had disappeared. Zoro! Luffy screamed. A roar drew my attention, and I wrapped my arms around my captain's chest and leapt to the side just in time to avoid Monster Chopper's hand crashing down on top of us. Stop, Chopper! I yelled once I had regained my stance. Don't be reckless. Where did Zoro go? Luffy continued screaming. He whipped around, glaring at where Sentomaru stood a few feet away. Oi, what did he do to Zoro? Where did he go? Answer me, damn it. I have no obligation to answer, Sentomaru said roughly. I'm the most tight-lipped man in the world. Despite his words, the rotund marine side-eyed us. They say that anyone who gets blasted by his pads is sent flying for 3 days and 3 nights, though I'm not sure whether it's true or not. Luffy choked on a breath, eyes wide with horror. Nobody except the person who was sent flying knows where to, though, but it definitely won't be on this island, or anywhere else where you might meet them anytime soon. They might end up on the edge of some distant sea. But you can guarantee you'll never see them again. What? Luffy glanced toward where Usopp, Brook and Sanji lay half dead at the warlord and pacifista's mercy. However, Kuma surprised everyone by blasting PX-1 away, the cyborg flying off into the distance. You three, run, Luffy ordered. Run away. We'll think this through once we're safe. We never got the chance. One by one, the rest of us succumbed to the power of the Shichibukai. Brook vanished next, attempting to protect Usopp as he tried to get Sanji to safety. Usopp was the next to disappear, having been discarded for his safety by the enraged cook. This roused Sanji into a greater state of anger, but that anger proved his downfall, and the world-class chef disappeared midair, leaving nothing but a blast of wind behind. Luffy burst into gear second, ignoring my warning to not let his rage overcome him, but despite his fearsome power, Frankie vanished with a small pop. Our brilliant navigator followed immediately after, Luffy desperately screaming her name. Chopper roared again, his enormous form reaching out for the bear man, but in the blink of an eye, even that monstrous body had been sent flying. Zoro, Brook, Usopp, Sanji, Frankie, Nami, Chopper, only Luffy and I were left. The captain was a wreck. Eyes blinded by fear and rage and hopelessness, confidence shattered. His body was beaten and battered, mental exhaustion taking its toll on his mind. Watching his beloved Nakama vanish right before his eyes. He may not have realized it, but I took the blows as hard as he did. Under previous circumstances, I wouldn't care if the crew became separated like this. But because I had grown to love them, the entire family, the family I never had, was falling apart. I somehow wasn't surprised as Kuma slowly began to walk in my direction. Frightened, yes, but not surprised. I backed away from him, my own body depleted of energy, but I wouldn't stop running. I'd had 20 years of practice, after all. Luffy, still trying to recover from the loss of the navigator and doctor, was too far to reach me in time, but he tried anyway. Robin, he yelled, putting one last-ditch effort to save me, reaching out his arm, fingers extended. Luffy, I yelled back, stretching out to meet him, but I knew inside it was too late. Until we meet again. Shibodi Archipelago blinked from existence. 2 years later. It's been a long time, everybody. Brook chortled merrily, standing from where he had gracefully landed on the deck of the Thousand Sunny where Nami, Usopp, Frankie and I had already congregated. The old skeleton looked practically the same since I had last seen him 2 years ago, but now he wore floral pants and a long-sleeved suit with a bright orange feather boa scarf around his shoulders. An odd combination, I'd admit, but a nice one all the same. You two have become even more beautiful, the musician continued, turning TTO look where Nami and I sat side by side on the bench. He moved and sat on a nearby barrel, crossing one leg over the other. Alright, Nami-san, it's been 2 years so. Oh, are you going to sing for us? The nearly unrecognizable sharpshooter asked excitedly. Brook opened his mouth, appearing to be answering Usopp's request until he comically fooled us. Could I look at your panties? What do you think? Nami screeched, sending Soul King trembling to the deck with a powerful sideswipe. I never let you see them, even 2 years ago. I'm so excited to see you again, see. It's shaking my soul, although I don't have a soul to be shaken. Hey, the big star is having a spasm, Usopp commented plainly. Honestly, Nami sighed, none of you guys have grown up. By the way, Brook continued after regaining his composure. I don't see everyone here yet. It was true, the musician had noted the absence of Chopper, Sanji, Luffy and Zoro. Yes, I explained with a smile. Chopper went to get them. There was a tug on my heart at the thought of seeing the swordsman again. My last memory of him was not a pretty one, a time of despair, fear, and hopelessness. I wanted to replace that memory with one of our reunion after 2 long years of separation. I wondered how much he had changed, if he changed at all. I didn't fool myself into thinking he would come back wearing his usual white shirt, haramaki and black pants, bandana round his left arm, snoring loudly on the deck. As if on cue, a familiar yell resounded toward us, and we all turned to face the direction from which the cry had come. Fro the trees came the massive multicolored bird Chopper had brought with him, but 3 more figures could now be seen alongside the tiny doctor. Here they come, Frankie said cheerfully. Hey, Luffy yelled again, the happiness on his face overwhelming. One could almost never guess the tragedies that had befallen him. Everyone. As he drew closer, our captain's face slowly grew clearer. His visage had become older and more defined, losing some of the boyish features he had 2 years ago. The 19-year-old had traded his sleeveless vest with a cardigan and a yellow sash. I saw Sanji next. The cook had grown taller, the beginnings of a beard stubbing his chin. His hair was longer as well, the yellow bangs swept to the other side of his face to reveal his left eye, the brow spiraling downwards. He had not lost his crisp black suit, nor the cigarette dangling from between his lips spread into a wide smile. My eyes finally found Zoro, Chopper perched on his shoulder as usual. The swordsman, as if sensing my eyes upon him, turned his head to meet me, smiling gently. He was definitely buffer than I remembered, taller and covered with more scars, including one over his left eye. I guessed it was safe to assume it was useless now. Now he wore a long green yukata and red sash, the 3 swords stuck through his prized haramaki. I brought them. Chopper greeted. Luffy, Zoro, Sanji. Usopp cheered. Hey! Nami waved, a bright grin on her elegant countenance. I smiled widely as the family was once again reunited, not moving my eyes for an instant from the approaching men. You guys sure do look stronger. Frankie praised. Luffy-san. Brook sobbed. I missed you so much. We're all together again. Usopp voiced everyone's innermost feelings, wiping a stray tear from his eye. The bird landed, and Luffy, Zoro and Chopper disembarked as Usopp went to collect Sanji from the Red Ocean. I hope the cook wouldn't bleed to death after the amount of blood spurting from his nose with such force to knock him from the bird's back. Luffy marveled over Frankie's reinforced body as Chopper sent his newfound friend along his way. Zoro, however, only had eyes for me, and he paced across the deck rapidly to where I stood near the opposite rail, watching. Robin, he said, and that was all he needed to say before I threw myself at him, connecting our lips in a passionate kiss. He returned it strongly, arms wrapped around my waist in the way I had so missed during our separation. Words didn't need to describe how much each of us had ached for the other, not knowing anything of their whereabouts. Zoro and I let the kiss do the talking. Get a room, someone, probably Nami, said, but I paid no mind. We broke apart for breath, and I simply stood there and relished the presence of the man whom I loved. His physical warmth engulfed me, the feeling of safety and comfort I had not felt during all my years running from the world government. The person who had taught me to love, involuntarily of course, was here, alive and breathing, holding me tight against him like he couldn't bear to let me go. The ship was suddenly rocked as a cannonball crashed into the ocean directly beside us. Everyone rushed to the railing, beholding the 3 Navy warships approaching Shibodi Archipelago and aiming straight for us. Just like old times, Zoro chuckled. I nodded. Just like old times. In no time at all, the coating was inflated, and the Straw Hat Pirates yelled triumphantly as the Thousand Sunny sank beneath the waves, leaving behind the beautiful island. Shibodi Archipelago. The place of our death. And the place of our rebirth. Finn. Disclaimer: this story do not belong to me. The author is the stuff of legends by 1004 Angel. The end.